All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 15th meeting of the Ashland Board of Selectmen. I would ask, Joe, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I would be delighted, thank you.
All right.
It's been a while since we've been here.
Remember?
Since I've been here. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure. And I'll just, if anybody here is recording this meeting besides WACA-TV, just let me know. I see none. All right, vision statement. Yolanda, would you like to read the vision statement?
Sure. Vision statement. The town of Ashland will be a prosperous and fiscally sound community with a full range of housing, business, cultural, educational, and recreational opportunities in a safe and attractive environment for residents and visitors.
Okay, thank you. Mission statement. Steve, you want to read the mission statement?
Sure. Mission statement. The Ashland Board of Selectmen is dedicated to promoting responsible fiscal management, advocating for sustainable development and growth, and providing excellent municipal services which will enhance the quality of life in our diverse community. The Ashland Board of Selectmen is committed to providing clear goals and objectives for town management and creating effective engagement and public participation with residents, state legislators, and other elected officials in order to achieve our mission.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, so I will call, is there anyone here for citizens' participation?
Hasn't been that long, has it? Good evening.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Hope we have a spring that has green, no more white in future plannings. Welcome back to Mr. Joe.
Thank you, sir.
And since we last saw each other, yeah, my dad's back home,
That's always a good thing to
healthy,
hear.
healthy to his aspects. And I'd like to thank the town hall, Board of Selectmen for saying things when I spoke up the first time, and to the fire departments who was there. Now, from there, it's me again. And we're not gonna, and my house is not gonna repeat. What has happened is sent out personal, professional, visiting people, nurses, therapy people, hygiene people. So it's me just to say, go ahead, I'll stay out of the way. And we're all happy there.
Good.
Mr. Herbert, can you update what happened in Boston today? When the tips?
Or you can save it for your,
Save it for a board
You can
report.
save it.
Okay,
for a report.
save, okay. Apparently I wasn't all that excited, it was State House, okay. I would like to say, it's very quiet, and I know it's gotta be quiet behind me. And let's hope next week, next Tuesday, it starts off quiet. The Board of Health has got their first meeting with the new member.
oh, very good. All right, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, the next item on the agenda is board reorganization. So, I just thank you, Carl, for your past service as chair, and so now it's time to have, elect new officers. So I'll open it for nominations.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Rob Scheer as chair.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
And I'll third that.
All right. Any other nominations for chair?
Nope.
All right, hearing none, so we will vote on nomination of Robert Scheer as chair. And the motion's been made in second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Well, thank you for your faith in me, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Good luck.
Any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Steve Mitchell as vice chair.
Second?
Motion, any other nominations for vice chair? All right, motion has been made and seconded for Steve Mitchell for vice chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motions? Congratulations, Mr.
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair.
Congratulations.
Appreciate the confidence, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, so we have the clerk left,
I
so,
would like to nominate Yolanda Greaves as clerk.
Second that.
all right, any other nominations for clerk? None? Oh, okay, motions have made and seconded. Yolanda Greaves as clerk. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Congratulations, Yolanda, for clerk. Okay.
Glad to pass it on.
Yeah, there you go. You got big shoes to
No more
fill
writer's
there.
cramp.
All right, any other reorganization business we need to do? We all set?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. All right, I forgot my gavel. Damn, all right. So, but I'll bring one in, okay. All right, so I asked the Sustainability Committee to come in, and I see they're out there. So, did folks, they had emailed me some stuff which I sent around, so I don't know if people had a chance to look at that.
Did.
But so come on, Matt and Kyle, come on up, and I don't know if there's room for both of you at the podium there.
Hang out here while he's talking.
Well, come up and at
You know, we
least
sit right
introduce
next to him.
yourself, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, you should both introduce yourselves, and,
Yeah, she'll speak after me, so she'll have
Okay,
a chance to
very
introduce
good.
herself. So I'm going to talk about Matt Marshquist, Weston Road. I'm going to talk chair of the Sustainability Committee.
uh-oh. Yeah, probably. What are you doing here?
Leah's calling.
I'm looking for that email that he sent.
So, yeah, I'm going to talk about the plastic bag ban campaign, and Kyle's going to talk about a couple other exciting initiatives we have going on. So the plastic bag ban passed at the last town meeting, and it was approved by the Secretary of State. The effective date was set to be 6 months after town meeting or approval by the Secretary of State, whichever came later. So it's now going to be July 26th is the date that it goes into effect, which is a little more than 4 months away,
Oh, July 26th.
which
Okay.
feels like not a lot of time when you think about what we need to do to get ready. So we're definitely ramping up our efforts. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago with some members of the group in Framingham who helped to pass their ban and then helped to put on the transition campaign. And that group gave us some great information about what they did. Some of the things that they did are very useful. They have a checklist for businesses. They sent letters to businesses. They had a working group with the Board of Selectmen, the Chamber of Commerce, and the DPW that met at least a few times to talk through the transition. So I think our group is looking to set up at least one meeting to kind of get a holistic view, maybe with a member of the Board of Selectmen, someone from the town management and the DPW, and maybe Beth Reynolds, and just kind of talk through how we can help businesses and residents to really succeed with this change. Success looks like a lot more people using renewable bags. The more people who do that, the less cost there is for businesses and the better it is for the environment. So our goal would be to encourage that as much as possible. There are a couple places where we might be able to use communications that are going out already from the town. Possibly, if there's a mailing going out, a water sewer bill or that type of thing, we're hoping to maybe include a postcard just to inform people. And I think there are at least a couple communications we'd like to send. One would be a communication to affected businesses. And we've already sent mailings. We'd like to send another mailing. We sent one before town meeting. We'd like to send one now just to update them on the change. And the other communication would probably be one to residents 1 or 2 months before the change goes into effect. So I would probably like to, if we meet, we can talk through the timing on that, but hopefully that would be something that the town would agree to help us with coordinating.
So it sounds like you're asking the town, the assistants to do a mailing. Is that, do we need to meet again with them to talk about that, or is that something
No,
you
we
would
can-
just, yeah?
Yeah, we can talk offline about
Yeah,
that.
I think, Matt, you can approach, and we'll get, it sounds like something that we should be doing, so. Yes,
I hate to keep loading up your agenda, Yolanda, but would this be a good thing to have on around the clock?
Yeah, definitely. When I do my for our second meeting in March, when I do my selectmen's update about this meeting, I will mention the date. But also maybe in one of the shows in June, we could bring you guys on to help finish the promotion, but definitely. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be great. I also wanted to plug, there've been some grassroots efforts around this too, which is great. There are a couple events coming up, I think at the community center, where they're showing people how to sew reusable bags, and there was a flyer in the newspaper about that. Let me see if I can find the dates.
Steve, did you have a question?
So, Matt, just to clarify a little bit, so obviously the heavy lifting is with the businesses in town.
Right.
At this point, right? So have we communicated, I'm sure you've communicated with Shaw's, with Market Basket. How about all the convenience stores, all of those entities that, so just describe that mechanism and.
Yeah. So for the bigger stores, they have a corporate kind of program. You know, if the ban passes, they kind of know how to approach it. So we think that the smaller and mid-sized stores need more support, and we're putting together some resources. So the first thing is a letter that we'd like to send before the end of this month, just alerting everyone of the change in case they weren't aware, so they have time to get ready and use up their stock of bags. And then there are also some resources we're going to make available. So there's a checklist that has a lot of best practices, you know, things like what the cashier might say, instead of saying, you know, just giving them plastic bags, say, did you, bring, or giving them paper bags, say, did you bring a reusable bag? And that just kind of reminds people. So that checklist can be helpful. And I think we'll also try to set up some meetings one-on-one with businesses if they need support. So those are all the types of things that we'd like to do. We'd probably host the checklist on the town website. Once we get that set up, we'll provide a link to businesses.
Other questions or?
No, just a comment to follow up.
Sure.
And I'm sure you guys are aware, Green Up Ashland is that first day in May, that first Saturday.
Right.
So it would be good to, at that event, or as people are participating in that,
Sure.
certainly start spreading the word, have a flyer or information available for people who come and clean up. Might be a good way as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think we're definitely looking for events to leverage, and that's a
And Matt,
perfect
did you
one.
say you had a definite start date for this, or is that, when is?
Yeah,
what-
it goes into effect on July 26th. That's when the bylaw takes effect.
July 26th, so that's a big day.
And one more question about so I'm a merchant, I've got a supply of plastic bags. What happens on July 26th?
After July 26th, merchants should no longer be
So
handing
they're
them
not
out.
grandfathered in to be able to use their inventory of, that they've already bought and paid for?
In the bylaw, you know, the period of time between when it passed and when it goes into effect is when they're supposed to be using it up. It would probably be the town's discretion, you know, if someone's
In terms
using
of
them a little bit
enforcement.
after.
So that was my follow-up question, is enforcement as well.
Right.
So how do we anticipate enforcing this? Is this through,
It'll be through the Board of Health.
Board of Health? Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to also add, we're trying to put together a packet of materials for businesses, including posters and, you know, flyers that they can put up reminding people to use their bags. We might have a logo. We're hoping to have a high school student design something that we can use on bags that we're printing up to give out to residents. So there are a few different ways that we're trying to kind of get a lot of enthusiasm around it.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the bag ban?
No, thanks, Matt.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you
Good,
for all that.
thank you.
So Kyle is
Great
the
achievement.
co-chair. You know, you can
Okay.
introduce yourself, but she'll be speaking about composting and energy use.
So hi, I know some of you. I'm Kyle Allers of Teller Drive for many years. So we have a couple of different ideas that we've been throwing around. And part of the reason that we've been going through this process of generating new ideas is because we took a sustainability checklist that a local group drew up and filled it out for Ashland, and we compared it to several of the neighboring towns that have also filled it out. So we have a pretty good idea of what Ashland is doing well compared to other towns and where we have room for improvement. Obviously, we are a green community. We've used green community grants, which is awesome. We've done building audits. We have green energy reduction plans, all of the stuff that's required to become a green community. But there's also, you know, still plenty of grants that we could apply for and use that money for other initiatives. So a couple of the things we've been talking about recently, one is curbside town-wide composting. There are several other towns in Massachusetts that have already successfully implemented it, and there's a couple different ways you can do it. most towns start with a pilot program where residents pay like a small flat fee to participate to sort of see how it goes. I know recently in Beverly, they implemented a similar plan, and I believe the cost to households was 96 cents a week. But it really depends on geographically where you're located, what the company you're using is located, and how they sort of do the pickup. So there's a lot that goes into it, and part of what we're doing right now is doing a little bit more research because a lot of those companies are Boston-based, so seeing what's available out here. And then the second thing that we've recently started discussing is a number of towns have passed 100% renewable resolutions. Most of them are non-binding, and essentially what that means is the town makes a commitment to go 100% renewable, and because it's non-binding, there isn't really, you know, a set enforcement date or year or how that process is supposed to go about, but it's a starting point, and it's more of sort of a cultural nod to, we know the way that the state is going in general, and we want to make a commitment to participating in that. And I think that at the state level, a lot of these types of initiatives, 100% renewable, bag bans, composting, is, you know, we do see where that's going, and it will eventually be implemented at a state level. And I think part of what's important for us as a town is sort of getting people used to those types of initiatives so that, you know, when it is implemented at a state level, it's not a shock to anyone, and we can sort of adapt it to our specific needs as a town. I did bring a copy of the checklist that we filled out, but I realized that the font is very tiny. So I'm happy to email you guys a copy
Sure.
of it later,
That'd be
and I
great,
can
yeah.
also pass this around. But I think it's 57 items on the checklist, and so any items that are specifically of interest to any of you or you think would be particularly feasible or cost effective, you can let us know, and we'll incorporate that into our discussions.
Great.
Right.
Other, you know, one of the reasons I invited these guys here, because, you know, they just finished this plastic bag ban, which is a great achievement, and, you know, they're thinking about, as Kyle said, what is the next step, and I thought it'd be useful to have kind of a back and forth with the board about ideas that we might have. So, you know, if people have things they want to suggest or talk about at this time,
Or
feel free.
questions, generally.
Questions, yeah.
No, but I do have a suggestion. So the list will be going out for being at the town tent at the farmer's market. So I think that would be another opportunity for you to promote the bag ban. So when the calendar comes out, you know, if there's a specific day in the farmer's market schedule leading up to the bag date, make sure you guys get on the calendar to be at the town tent one of those Saturdays.
Anything? Yes, Carl.
I just want to commend all of you, but particularly Matt. It seems like it was not too long ago we were applying for green community status, and I was serving on the committee with Matt at the time. And Matt, I know what a hard worker you are, and I thank you for hanging in there for, it seems, I guess it's probably 5 years now. And the Sustainability Committee evolved out of that and is continuing to evolve and to be relevant in the town. And so congratulations to all of you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Question about the schools. I think they had a composting program at one time. Are they still,
I think they
that's
still do.
active?
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I'm not, he knows better.
And
But,
one of the
I'll
science teachers was
pass
doing
this around.
composting.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, the schools had is a student-led composting initiative. There was an environmental club at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's still an environmental studies class, and they may be maintaining the composting program, but I'd have to confirm that. It's always kind of a challenge to do those things, and it varies based on the enthusiasm of the volunteers and their willingness
Well, we
to do it.
We attempted over the years at the farmer's market to implement composting, and, you know, it's kind of gone up and down, cycled through, and, you know, it's a real commitment, and so be
Yeah,
interested to
See how
hear
it
more
works.
information once you compile your research.
yeah, it's an exciting thing. You know, it's a new project, and we're kind of in the discovery phase, so we're kind of open to possibilities, and so I look forward to
Right,
figuring out something.
Joe,
that
did
can
you have
help the
anything
town.
you wanted to ask?
I was
him?
trying to remember the teacher's name at the old high school. She started the initiative of composting. She even had the barrels, and they were going around and trying to sell barrels to raise money for future projects for the green community program that they were part of at the time. And her name slips
Miss
my mind.
Scott.
Miss Scott, thank you very
Yeah.
much, is exactly who it was. And so she, I'm not sure if she's still doing it anymore, but
I think someone else is doing it now, but she was a great resource for the town.
So my kind of thinking is, we've been having, of course, these very volatile storms, and we've got climate change going on. So, and unfortunately, last year we lost our energy director, or what was
Energy
it?
manager.
Energy manager. So, I don't know, there's things about energy or renewable energy that you guys see on your list that we should be continuing with, or maybe other milestones or goals we can put in place for that? I think that would be,
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few. Community aggregation is one. The town already has aggregated buying, but some towns choose to elect renewable energy, and the cost difference can be somewhat, small, actually, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. So that's something that we could look at.
and I have a feeling there'd be support for that. I mean, we're doing the solar project, we undertook all sorts of initiatives, and I think there'd be support for continuing in that direction.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, one thing, and Matt and I have talked about this, is, I mentioned, a couple meetings ago about the possibility of moving our trash pickup to, instead of, utilizing the bags exclusively, looking at utilizing a bin system, and any overage over that, you would use the bag system. And, I think they've already started to do a little bit of work on how that can impact recycling rates in town.
Oh,
It's not like heavy, heavy
That's some of
lifting.
it.
Well, there's certainly a lot of
Via email.
potential items, so. Any other comments or questions for these folks?
No, good work.
Yeah,
I
thank
look forward to
you.
getting that via email so I can read all
Yeah.
of it.
We can
and
put
go,
it, blow it up. Great, well,
time we printed it, it was bigger, so I don't
yeah, very good.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
coming
much
in,
for all
and
your
good
work,
luck with
folks.
all the
Thank
rest
you.
of it, and thanks.
All right,
Is this
Thank you.
going back
Uh,
to Michael?
I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
can go back. Do you want your list
Kyle-
back?
Kyle, you can come get your list.
Oh,
All right. So the next item on the agenda is the public safety / school safety discussion with Chief Davis. So Chief, if you want to, and, again, I suggested that, we, given the recent events that we're all too aware of, and, see if there's any, what we could talk about local public safety concerns or measures we've taken. Besides, of course, the tragic events in Parkland, there was a very disturbing attack in Winchester, a fatal attack. So I just, given that, and of course, our students are among nationwide, they're also, our students are joining in the kind of demonstrations on anti-gun violence. So I thought, given what's going on, and I know there's some key panels going on at the school about teen suicide and also difficult conversations. So I thought it'd be a good idea, Chief, and thank you for coming in to speak to us, just to kind of, talk about what your concerns are, the procedures we have in place for some of these issues, and just have a kind of feedback discussion about how things are going and what they look like. So, thanks, Chief.
And thank you. And I just wanted to start off by saying I attended the ceremony, I guess, for lack of better words, at the high school the other day with the students marching and giving a presentation. And it was very moving. They did a fantastic job. And they were all, everyone was very well behaved and poised, and I congratulate them on their efforts. So, moving forward, what are we doing? We're doing a lot of efforts in this area. Obviously, it's one of our biggest concerns is school safety. We firmly believe that, no child should feel insecure in a learning environment, that, learning should be the primary focus, mission, feeling when they're in a school environment, and not worried about security or the threat of security or lack thereof. So we have a lot of different, we're tackling this on a lot of different fronts, and one of them is the educational component. We are training, all of our officers were anticipated to train. We have, back in 2014, we trained all of our officers in the active shooter shooter protocol. We're replicating that this summer. So in a few short months, we'll be running all of our officers through that protocol again, which is basically how to respond rapidly to the sound of gunfire in an institutional setting. So we're doing that. We're training all the staff, new staff in the schools on the response protocols. As a matter of fact, we're opening up that protocol to include, hopefully in the fall, all staff in the schools. So not just new staff orientation, which is what's currently been done. We're going to open that up to all the staff in the schools. We have, as you know, Officer Dave Murray up at the high school as a school resource officer, which is our early warning system, first line of defense in the school system. But we're also augmenting that with Officer Stacy Kaiser, who's also been trained as a school resource officer, and she'll be present primarily at the middle schools, toggling back and forth between middle school and elementary school. She's currently out on leave. We expect her back within a few weeks, and she will most likely assume that role when she returns to active duty. And we have a few other measures in place, but we're looking at this holistically from a strict law enforcement perspective to how to respond, but also how to prevent proactively something like this, something like what happened in Florida from happening here. So there's a lot of different efforts that we're undertaking to address this issue.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I'll open this up to questions or observations.
Sure.
Steve?
So, Chief, I guess a couple things, given the conversations that are going on since Parkland, and hopefully they continue. I do want to comment. I think it's just incredible to see students across the country advocate the way they have.
Yeah,
and
very
it's just
impressive.
very impressive, and hopefully the message being received where it needs to be received. But law enforcement aside, one of the biggest issues, obviously, that's being discussed is mental health and how that
Right.
gets incorporated into the whole equation. We've got a social worker on staff. Obviously, there's guidance counselors in the schools. How do you describe a little bit of how that overlaps and how that all fits together with the police department and all those other services? And then also, I'd like to hear your comments on this conversation that's being that's coming from the federal government regarding firearms or arming school, either teachers or staff in the schools.
Yeah, not that we're putting you on the spot, Chief.
No. Well, first of all, let me address the mental health side and what we're doing about it. So the town has a social service worker that connects people with a lot of different services in town. But what we've done in the police department is we've actually engaged the services of a mental health clinician that's embedded with our police officers. When our officers go on calls for service, we actually have a mental health clinician that responds alongside of those officers to intervene with anybody who is suffering from mental illness that their activities may have risen to the police action. So we try to divert people as often as we can, minor offenders, divert them from the criminal justice system into appropriate mental health treatment. And I think that goes light years in addressing this issue, because our officers are the first ones to see people experiencing these crises and moments in their life. And certainly left untreated, they tend to fester. But when our officers are witnessing firsthand those types of situations unfold in the community, they often have our mental health clinician at their side, and they make that immediate referral to that clinician, who can then have that person placed into appropriate mental health crisis services. And that's what they are, they're crisis services. So we're intervening at the very earliest level. We're one of the few police departments in Massachusetts, even though the idea is catching on. I believe everyone knows that I started it when I was in Framingham, and then brought that program here regionally to Ashland a few years ago. It's been very, very successful, and I think it's really helped reduce some of the amount of not only recidivism, but some of the use of force incidents, some of the need for force, and getting folks into appropriate treatment and help where they normally would get sanctions and punitive measures from the criminal justice system, and then they'd be right back in the community with, and haven't been served. So we're handling, that at the very earliest stage to intervene in people's lives when we feel that, they're sort of falling through the system. And then, of course, we proactively look at people who have firearm licenses, if they're involved in those situations, and see what can be done with that. So we have a lot of early warning systems built into our system that help us, flag those.
Thank you.
And then the other issue, I don't know
yeah,
if I want
yeah.
to tackle that one. I think that's best left up to the board.
Well, I did, while we're kind of on gun control
Yep.
issues, you did make, and I shared it with the board, a number of, I thought, very useful comments about Representative Linsky's, what is it called, extreme,
The extreme.
yeah, extreme risk protection orders,
Risk,
which I think got forwarded to him from our I shared it with Jack Lewis,
Yep.
who I think sent it to Dave Linsky, and I don't know if you and he have had a conversation about some of your concerns about that, but he said he was going to reach out to you. So,
Okay.
and I think just for, the chief, the extreme risk protective orders where either a social worker or some sort of worker can request that someone's guns be temporarily taken away, if a certain situation. And I think the chief's concern were like how the mechanics of that would work, since they were the folks responsible on the ground for handling that. And so I thought those were very useful comments that you made, and hopefully something will come out of, because from my point of view, I think we have pretty strong gun laws here, but that extreme risk protective order, when you talk about suicide or domestic violence or just people out of control temporarily, it seems like something that we should think seriously about.
And
So-
also, I think it's important for people to also realize that we already have a mechanism in place. I, as a licensing authority, have the ability to suspend somebody's firearm license based on suitability. So if there's a family member or someone in the community and they have some tangible, evidence that they can come forward to me and show that the person is unsuitable for that moment, then I can temporarily suspend the person's license until we can figure things out.
That's a great
So-
point, because
yeah.
I'm not sure people are aware of that,
Right,
frankly.
and
But-
so there's already a measure in place at every community across the state for that activity to happen, with even regardless of that extreme risk protective order. And as a side comment, that order came out of a committee that I had actually worked on with the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, and we had a lot of measures in place. Some of them were taken from that committee and placed into Representative Linsky's bill. So some of them are, as I said, are already available to local police chiefs. If a family member feels that, their family member who owns firearms is a risk to themselves or a risk to others, they can always come into the police department and express that. As long as it's a legitimate and tangible, something that's articulable that I can act on.
And you feel comfortable with that kind of, and have there been a lot of incidents like that recently, or?
I won't say there've been a lot of the incidents like that. We get that most often, when it does happen, is an aging parent,
Oh.
and their adult children are concerned for their well-being. They may have been a responsible gun owner their whole life, but because of their, declining health and mental status, there may be some questions of risk. So that's typically when people come forward to see me. But there are people that don't feel comfortable coming to the local police chief and expressing those concerns. And I think that's where that bill is meant to fill that gap.
Okay. Joe, you were.
I was kind of curious, I know we have a mental health worker on the department that goes with the officers. How many times has she been able to assist in making a situation more positive and more helpful for the individual that's at risk? Have we had a lot of cases where she's had to, provide services that way? And
I'm embarrassed to say I don't have the numbers.
No,
with
that's
me
okay,
off the
and
top
I'm
of
not
my
trying to put you
fingertips.
on the spot,
No,
believe
no,
me, I'm not.
I should have those, because I work on the grants and, you know, I attend monthly meetings and I look at the stats, but I'm blanking out, but I just know that it's very successful and we're using the program at a much higher frequency than I had ever envisioned when I brought the program here. So we are using it at a substantial amount. It was actually somewhat of an eye-opener to see how many times that our mental health clinician is intervening alongside with our officers. So I think it's, you know, here in Ashland, it's been a very, very successful program. And it is something that has been utilized, I'll say, almost on a nightly basis.
And if I may, just to follow up one, that's, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's kind of sad that our society has to have something like that, but is there an age qualification as to, are there more young people that are at risk that are being serviced, or is it a mix of ages?
It runs the gamut from
Yeah.
adolescence
That's what I figured.
to elderly, and everything in between, and every socioeconomic, you know, step along the way. It just really cross-cuts across the community, and that's typical in any of the community that we've seen these programs replicated.
Thank you.
Carl?
Chief, how does that work? Is that person on call, or on staff, or on duty, or how does that work?
Well, the person's a full-time employee. They're actually employed by Advocates, which is our mental health crisis team in the region. So they're an employee of Advocates, but they are embedded in our police department. So the way it works in our model, because we are a regional model with Hopkinton, Holliston, and Sherburne, that clinician spends typically 2 days a week in Ashland riding alongside of our officers. And then when he or she is called, corresponds with our officers. If our clinician is, say, in Holliston for the evening, then the Holliston, and we need her or him, the Holliston officer will transport that person to either the town line, and we'll provide the transport to the rest of the way, or simply bring them right to the scene. And we do that, you know, conversely, to help those communities on a mutual aid basis. I thought there was going to be a lot of hiccups in that type of relationship, and there hasn't. It's been seamless. And we've been doing it for almost 4 years now for this program, and that type of arrangement has, like I said, gone on almost seamlessly. So as a matter of fact, we just got some more grant money, so not only are we doing a 40-hour program a week, but it's up to about 60 hours. So we have a full-time clinician plus half-time, and we use it. We use it, so.
Thank you. I guess while you're here, you want to say anything about the opiate epidemic, or how are things looking out there? Better, worse? Any
You know, from,
trends that?
I don't want to jinx us, but I think we're seeing a lull, you know, a decline, at least here. And I say that because we're using Narcan less. I don't know why. I'm hoping it's because of opioid overdoses are coming down a little bit here. But there could be other factors that I'm not aware of. There could be people have more access to Narcan and they're not calling emergency services. There could be more of an awareness about fentanyl. There could be a whole host of reasons why our overdose rates have come down, but whatever it is, I'm thankful for it. I hope the decline, you know, continues. And like I said, I don't want to jinx it. So, but right now, in this moment, our rates have come down a bit.
Heather, anything else with the chief?
And I will say that our officers have done and the fire service have done a fantastic job with saving people's lives with Narcan. I remember when we first implemented Narcan, again, it was one of those things that I really didn't see us using a lot. And during the real height of this epidemic, last year, the year before, we were using it constantly. And like I said, our officers have done a Herculean job saving people's lives with Narcan, and they've even, you know, used it not just 1 dose, 2 dose, sometimes 3 doses to bring people around enough where they can regain their consciousness and be transported safely to a hospital. So they've done an amazing job with this.
Wow. Well, thank you, Chief, and I appreciate you
Thank you.
coming in and all the work that you do, and all the folks on the department as well. And I'm sure we'll be talking about the storm later, and I understand that, you know, we all know the public safety personnel did a great job during these last storms and these fires and everything else that's happened.
Yep.
So thank you, Chief. Appreciate you coming in and briefing us on this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is Complete Streets Policy Adoption, and I think Sheila Page is here to do that. Hi, Sheila.
Hello, thanks
Hi,
for
Sheila.
having me.
Coming in.
Yeah, so you all have in your packets the complete street policy. As you know, Ashland is participating in the MassDOT Complete Streets Funding Program, and that provides, it's a competitive basis, but it'll provide up to $400,000 per year per community. And it is for shovel-ready projects that improve pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular, and freight access to transportation. We're required to have a complete streets policy to participate in this program. And the purpose of the policy is to integrate transportation planning practices into everything we do when we're thinking about our streets. As you might remember, the Board of Selectmen discussed the complete streets policy back in 2015. And we have the benefit now of the communities that have gone before us, so that we can now have a great policy. So we've improved the policy from 2015, and some of those improvements are that this policy better clarifies exemptions. It provides a more comprehensive list of resources for the working group. It outlines responsibilities of the Complete Streets Working Group, as well as key factors that they should be considering when they evaluate projects. And in addition, the Roadway Traffic Safety Committee is, or as designated by the Board of Selectmen, will be the Complete Streets Working Group. So I ask you to sign this policy tonight so that we can submit it ahead of submitting our prioritization plan, which we're going to do at the end of March.
Very good.
And then a little update on the prioritization plan. Green International, through a grant from the state, has been working on the plan. And I got to say, and I think Yolanda will agree, the process has been great in that we now have a list of 50 projects that are outlined, pretty detailed on how much we expect them to cost, how long it'll take, so that beyond the Complete Streets funding, we can jump on other opportunities. So it's been a really good process. And in part of that process was we used the Wiki Maps, which is a mapping tool where residents can place comments in a certain area of town. And let's see, High Street, Oak Street, and Cross Street ranked very high with a desire for sidewalks. And in addition to that, a lot of other streets did as well for sidewalks, bike accommodations, and safe crossings. So the other issue that Green's helping us with is there's, first of all, the order of the listing. We can apply for projects out of order, so the order is not super important. But what Green is helping us do is balance high priority plans versus the readiness, because Complete Streets money is for only shovel-ready projects. So the whole process has been really good because it'll help us think forward when we have a little pot of money, what engineering we can do to queue up these projects. Yeah, so that's it.
So I
And
think
here's the
we
plan
do
for
need to vote
signature.
on the policy, right? But I think we
Yes.
should, questions, comments, Joe?
I do. Sheila, thank you, and I'm sorry I couldn't be at the last traffic study meeting. I was out of state. But in reading this over, I was kind of surprised that we're talking about, stormwater study groups and everything that are coming up and talking about a policy with respect to stormwater. And I'm kind of surprised that stormwater is not part of the Complete Streets project, because I would think that would be beneficial. Because when you're engineering and designing a street, stormwater should be part of that engineering design. And I'm kind of surprised there's nothing in here with respect to that. I don't know, maybe I'm just talking out of turn a little bit or thinking out of the box, but maybe that's something we should entertain.
Yeah, although, yeah, that's interesting, because I think the Complete Streets is talking about the surface, whereas the stormwater is underneath, but
Well,
it
not
has to get
necessarily.
there.
Stormwater has to
Right,
get under the surface, and it
Right.
gets there through the surface, so maybe
Right.
that's something that should be looked at.
Right,
Just a thought.
yeah.
Just a thought.
Thanks. Yolanda, did you,
Well, I just want to give a little bit more. So I know at our last meeting, we had talked about if we could see the list before it gets to the state.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we weren't quite at that point to be able to bring it to our group. So we are working, we're hoping to get it to the state by the end of March, and then I think we can bring the list back to the Board of Selectmen to sort of look where we're at.
Yeah,
So
sounds good.
that we can say, if we want to tweak some of the things. And as Sheila said, even though we have our priority list in place, we might go below the top 10 because they're shovel-ready or they're engineered for us to get money from the state. And it's a process that's ever moving. So we'll apply for grant money this year, but we'll apply again in the future as we have other projects and as we say, okay, we're at a point where we can do this. So I know that the group had asked to look
Sure.
at the list,
Yeah.
but I think it had to get pushed out just so we can move the process along.
Yeah.
But as you said, we do need to have this signed, and what's weird is we as a board, Carl and Rob, you weren't sitting here when we did this, but when we did this, we approved it, and
Right.
for some reason, it
I
just
think we
didn't
were
get
here, because I
signed.
remember,
Were you here?
Yeah.
It might have been your first,
yes, I'm not
You
sure
were
what happened.
just a few months in.
yeah,
Yeah.
but, because we had approved it, and,
Right.
I mean, we even got ranked like one of the top 10 policies in the nation.
Right.
And then for some reason, it just did not
wasn't-
get signed. for
Yeah,
some
it wasn't
reason.
sent
So,
to the state, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Or did we sign it and the signature page
It
got
didn't,
lost?
no, for some reason it
So,
didn't get.
I just want to comment that I thought, we had the working group, we did, I guess the working group was expanded a bit, I thought.
Correct.
From what I saw, I thought it was a very good process. We got some folks from the Upper Charles Trail Committee, I know there was some, and I don't know if you had other people that came and got some
Plan-
input, so I
yeah,
think it was
planning
good.
board member,
I
school
like the
committee
idea
was
of
invited,
expanding
yeah.
it a bit beyond the Traffic Safety Committee and kind of reaching out to people. And I hope
Yeah.
we can do that on an ongoing basis, maybe have a little larger group, so you get a diversity of perspectives on this,
Yeah.
so.
The one, just, if I could just not rebut, but just respond to that. What I think was very helpful was the fact that everyone in the community was able to go online
another
and give their feedback.
point.
Whereas if you're just doing it at a meeting, yes, you could have a few more people involved in the meeting, but by having it online, we had a large number of
good,
people
right.
from the community give us their input and let us know where their concerns were,
Good
which
using
We had
those
90
tools.
a very good use of
Yeah.
that tool.
90
Very
responses,
good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Steve?
So I just wanted to comment, also, since you brought up the Upper Charles, that, and we're gonna give an update a little bit later in old new business, but we have two subcommittees that are working right now relative to the Upper Charles Trail. So one of our discussion points is the overlay between Complete Streets and the trail. Given
Right.
the complexities of a trail system
Oh, yeah.
in Ashland, how do we figure out that overlay, and how do we coordinate in the best way between those two events?
Right, so we do have on the prioritization plan, Green, I think, split it into 6 parts, and it's on the plan, but because we need site control and engineering, it'll be lower down, but it's on there, so as we move forward and get opportunities for that funding,
Great.
it'll
Yeah.
help push the project forward, for
Yeah,
sure.
And before,
Yeah.
I think you described Complete Streets briefly, but just for folks watching who may not be familiar, this is the idea when we repair or redo a street or focus on an intersection improvement or other, that we look at the whole complete pedestrians, bicyclists, other forms of, having, besides just automobile or truck traffic, we think about a kind of holistic, and that's the whole idea. We voted on this a year or maybe 2 years ago, and we've been moving along, and so now we have the opportunity to get some funding and actually do some of these actual improvements, so.
Yeah, we're shooting for May to submit for funding,
Yeah.
so I hope. Yeah, I mean,
So-
some of the projects are very simple, like, Green noticed that the cross button is out of reach because it's on the other side of the guardrail, so somebody in a wheelchair or with impaired mobility can't reach it. So
Right.
there's simple things to a cycle track. along a road, so it runs the gamut.
Complicated.
And fixing some of our lights so that if you come up with a bicycle, it senses
Yes.
you. Whereas
Right.
that would be a very easy fix for some of our intersections where bicyclists are like, there's no way for me to trigger it.
Nothing's happening,
Yeah, yeah.
Very good. So I think we need a motion to approve this complete streets policy.
I move that we approve the complete streets policy for the town of Ashland as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Matt, motion
Do you have a-
passes unanimously.
Do you have a copy for us to sign?
Oh, yo, we're gonna sign this one?
Oh, yeah. I want Tara to stamp it in
Sheila's
tomorrow.
not leaving until she
Yeah.
has a signed copy.
I'm gonna
Oh,
submit
you
it
want a
tomorrow.
signed one? Oh.
Yes.
Where's my agenda here?
Did you vote? Did you end up voting?
Yes.
I'm sorry, everybody,
5-0.
it was passed unanimously.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Sheila and Doug Small and Yolanda. I know, they kind of put the public process
And
piece
Ed.
together, and Ed,
Yeah.
Ed Berman. They've done a lot of work on this in terms of just from securing the grant with Green, which was $35,000. It was not an insignificant amount of money to do this work, and then also, again, helping put it together and driving the process. So, thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Moving.
All right, so,
Almost, Sheila.
All right.
Two more.
getting there, wait a minute. No, I'm kind of busy right
Pick it up
now.
on my way out.
We have to let the lefty sign.
All right.
So,
All
Mr.
right.
Magnani, you're gonna have more work to do on the.
I'm ready for that, that's fine,
The Traffic Study Committee.
that's fine.
Very
Well,
good.
That's good. Good.
Just remember, it's the Traffic Study Committee, not the Complete Streets Study Committee.
That's right.
There's a lot of knowledge
Oh, oh, yeah. Well,
That
I tell you,
Ah, the
it's
15th.
awesome.
And it's been helpful. I
It's
mean,
been a
the couple
great
of sessions
committee,
that we've
yeah.
had with them, plus the additional people, has been very, very good,
Okay.
very productive.
We're good.
All right.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thanks, Sheila, thanks for all your work,
So, the next item is a one-day license request for Zealous Beer Company at the corner spot. And do I have a statement here that I need to read? One day. Yeah. All right, so I actually, I don't, Michael, do I need to, you must be from Zealous. All right, I guess I'll open, do I need to open a hearing or anything? Or we just, so I'll open a hearing on this one-day license request from Zealous Beer Company. And it's April 13th to the 19th, Monday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's Marathon Day, right? And Tuesday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the corner spot. Saturday, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then April 20th through the 26th, Monday to Friday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. So this is a one-day license request that includes a number of days, actually. Okay.
Basically,
14
days.
14 days, thank you. I didn't want to count them
weeks.
up.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
All right,
14 days.
so, go ahead, sir, and you are?
My name is Jeffrey Petter. I am the owner, or the
You
principal
can
owner
adjust
of
that
Zealous.
microphone if you need to. It just moves up, I think,
I'm just a little tool, maybe.
yeah.
I'm the principal owner of Zealous Beer Company. So yeah, we're requesting 14 days, April the 13th, April the 26th, which does include Marathon Monday, at the corner spot. We're a brewery. We have served in Ashland before.
Yes.
We did an event, actually we've done quite a few events. We won the license ourselves, which was on the marathon route last year. We've also done the Brew Fest in town, and we also did the half marathon, which occurred last October. Yes, we are interested potentially opening a brewery in Ashland at some point.
Really?
I can't say that actually will definitely happen, but we are interested. And we as I said, we requested 14 days, 2 weeks. We want to fill the market out, I guess, see what the market in Ashland is like. And Beth opened the opportunity of the corner spot, which typically hasn't been open to licensed, as a licensed venue for alcohol, but it has been offered for, different
It's not accurate.
different other retailers. We are a fully licensed brewery, federally and statewide. And we sell to about 140 accounts now. When I was here last year, we weren't in nearly as many accounts. There are over 10,000 licensed properties in Massachusetts, so we've got quite a long way to go until we're in all of them. But we see basically Ashland, or the Corner Spot, as a good opportunity, a PR opportunity for us, and also potentially for Ashland. We have a much larger following than we did last year, and we do think we can bring people in from other towns to Ashland with this event. We have a large following on social media, and we've created a bit of a niche audience for ourselves. And one of the reasons we wanted to cross the marathon was because obviously we're a brand which is about active lifestyle, and the marathon is about active lifestyle.
Okay.
That's-
Questions? I see Beth Reynolds is here. Beth, did you want to add to the? Beth Reynolds is our Economic Development Director and oversees the Corner Spot amongst her other duties, right?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for entertaining this opportunity. Again, we created the Corner Spot to be a pop-up business location in Ashland, a place where different businesses can try out their hand at a brick and mortar. This is a great opportunity for something that we have not had there. We did have one day of a beer fest last year, but this would be a nice opportunity to try out what having a brew pub would be like downtown. I think it's a great opportunity. We've worked with Jeff before. I think that it would just be a good use of this space that we haven't tried before, and it would be a great destination. So again, like Jeff just said, it would draw people in from other towns. I think it would lend itself to a lot of community activities that we could do there. And again, the ask is there. People want to have something like this in downtown, so this is a great opportunity to try that out for 2 weeks.
Change the infrastructure there? Now there's just one kind of smallish, so.
We'd have some outdoor, we'd maybe add some outdoor seating right outside the shed, and then they would have actually high-top chairs and tables inside. Again, I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
speak to the food options, but we have figured out some food opportunities. So there is a vendor, a local, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, if you have something else in your presentation, you should say before otherwise we'll just ask anyway, so. but-
Right.
You can talk about the food truck.
So, there is a local food truck vendor in town, actually, that has offered to park his trailer there to serve food there while they're there. So it would be permanent for a week, we figured. He's working on that second week. But if that doesn't work out, we do have local businesses in town that we could partner with that could either deliver to the Corner Spot or people could bring in their own food there. So I don't see that being an issue at all.
Steve?
So a couple of questions. Now, if I'm not mistaken, last year you were here in Ashland, but you were at the telecom building, is
Right.
that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, out front, yes.
Was it really?
Whenever it was, he was here in the past.
Right.
So we've got a lot of diagrams here. It's a little confusing as to how this actually is being laid out. Are we using the shed? And how are we corralling the alcohol? I mean, we assume we're not allowing people to walk
Walk around.
throughout the Corner Spot or walk every which way. Typically, we would anticipate a corral of some sort. So how's that being accomplished?
Well, that is one of the questions, actually. So the alcohol would be served inside the Corner Spot. The question is how much they're allowed outside of the Corner Spot to drink the beer, right? So one of the suggestions we had was using colored wristbands. So only people who have these wristbands would be able to purchase or be able to drink alcohol outside of the building, or even inside the building, obviously. The alternative is to create some kind of roped area outside. This is obviously at your discretion. We'd prefer that not to be the case because it would reduce the community level of interaction because you would only be allowed inside the fenced whatever it is. We have ropes and we can do this, but it would review. You can't have kids inside there necessarily. Or you could. I guess the question is, how much of restrictions do you want to put in people drinking alcohol outside of the building? And how much
So-
do you need a roped area?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the board, but I'll speak for myself at this point, because typically, these situations, at least from my observation and my attendance, they've always been either in a corralled area, or they've been inside of a tent, and everything is segregated into those areas. And it's not wide open to the street, the parking lot, whatever. The wristbands are great. They identify, somebody that's paid to have a beer, but that doesn't prevent anybody from going anywhere beyond whatever boundary we assign. So my preference is to have some sort of a corral, for lack of a better word, whether it's rope, whatever.
And how large could that corral be?
Well, that's why I'm asking about this, because we got lots of plans. You tell me how big would you like it, and then we can talk about it.
I guess the preference would be for the size of the grass area around the corner spot. So you've got a fence which, up to the road there, and then it goes up to the parking lot. I mean, you could rope the whole area off if you needed.
I think also, so we've tested this twice. So we've had alcohol there twice before. We had the beer fest, that we had 2 vendors serving alcohol. We did cord off a little bit of that. It was awkward. People were leaving their beers on their table to then go play cornhole with their children, or it was just a little awkward. It was fine, it did the job, but I don't know that it necessarily
Well, I think
stopped
there's-
anything from
I think
happening.
there's enough space there, though, Beth, to make a space in front of the shed to accommodate whether it's seating or activities.
But if people are having
rather than the
dinner,
entire corner
right,
stop.
so then we had another example was when we had fireflies there. And that, nothing was corded off for that.
Able to go anywhere.
And they were able
Yeah.
to sit down and have their dinner with their family and enjoy a beer,
Yeah.
as they would in a regular restaurant, which would, in this situation at the corner spot, they would use those pallet tables underneath the shaded area.
Thank you.
So,
But there were also, if I can add to that, Beth,
Sure.
because I was in attendance several times because of the food. And it was because of the food. It wasn't because of the beer that they were serving. It was because of the food that was being served. So here, it's, actually kind of other way around. You're promoting your product, which is your beer beverages. A little bit different than food being served out of a food truck that we had there. And they were promoting their food, not their beer. I'm kind of reserved on how I feel about doing this, especially 14 days. A one-day license to do it, you were already here doing that once. Now it looks like you're trying to get a sense of what the community wants, and you're looking at the whole area here. Well, we're talking about brick and mortar type of building. That's an open space. If it was a closed-in building, that's a different ballgame. You can contain what's going on inside a building. It's kind of difficult when you have an open seating area, especially in the downtown area, where you have streets on 2 sides, actually 3 sides of that project, of that location. And, again, who's gonna monitor the number of drinks an individual has if they're walking around? And how many bartenders, and who's gonna keep a checklist of, oh, you've already had 3 or 4 beers already? How is that gonna be determined? And I don't think you have an answer for that. And my former life, being a police officer, I have some concerns over that. So you need to convince me that that's going to be under watchful eye. And I don't know if you have the ability to do that if everybody's walking around and nobody knows who's doing what, who's serving who. So that's my only concern that I have.
Well,
You want to respond to that?
Well, legally, you're only allowed to serve 2 beers at one time, right? So, I mean, someone can buy more than 2 beers, but you're only allowed to serve one individual 2 beers at one time. So that's all we would be doing. I think that's more than one issue, though, right? One of them is how do you restrict the space, right? And the other issue is, well, how are you going to control how much you're serving people alcohol? Well, that's our responsibility as serving alcohol.
And you feel, given however we set it up, you'll have the visual ability to monitor how much people are drinking, is that what you're saying?
And there's only one you're only selling it out of the shed, right? So if they want to buy more than one, they have to go into the shed
Yes.
to get more beer.
Yeah, so we're not going to serve it all over the place. No,
Right.
we have one point. It'd actually be one. It's called a jockey box, and all the taps be off a single jockey box. So yeah,
I have a couple of questions. Are there toilets at the corner spot?
I think there
Yes.
is, yeah.
Okay. And has anybody consulted the neighbors about this? And if so, what's their response?
I did ask Beth about that. Apparently, there's one neighbour, and they're quite excited for this to happen. That's that's
It won't
that's
be at
my-
10 o'clock, they're making noise.
Wait a minute. I missed that one. There was one neighbor that was
There-
excited?
There's a neighbour which is adjacent to the corner spot. I don't know their name, but seemingly they are quite excited to have the
Yeah, I
us.
think we,
I did not receive any negative feedback from any of the events that we've had there previously at the
Okay.
corner spot. I mean, if there's a concern for the time, the time frame that they would be open into the evening, then we can certainly address that, but we've had events there until 8:30, 9 o'clock with music, and we never got one complaint. I'd never got one complaint.
Can I just talk
So I
to?
don't see why this would.
Can I talk just one other point? The concept of pop-up breweries or pop-up beer gardens is not a new one. This is not the first time. You can think of Trillium, which had a beer garden in the Greenway, downtown Boston. They also have one currently in Rosendale where they have more than just, I don't know how they've been licensed.
So now you wanted to talk about Trillion, because I've been there. and-
It is a building, yes.
Excuse me?
It's restricted to a building.
It's restricted
Yes.
also by fencing all the way around. The one that I was on the Greenway,
Yeah.
it's fencing all the way around it. So you can't leave that and walk down the Greenway with a beer. Those are the rules.
Right.
It's no different than what we did when we had the beer fest at the VFW in the back. It
was a
was in a tent. No different than the Metro Fest. They had a beer and wine tent. You were segregated to that tent. You could not walk around Bowditch Field with a beer or a glass of wine in your hand. So I think for me, the challenge is, how do we make it work in kind of a segregated area but allow for activities or allow for enough space. Would seem to me there's enough space there to do this, but it might require moving some of the seating, it might require moving some of the equipment.
Yeah, I think to Steve's point, I think we're thinking that you need to define some sort of area that people should be staying within, right? I mean, rather, if you give out wristbands, it's fine, but how do they know they shouldn't walk into the parking lot or, go down the sidewalk, or something like that?
So you're talking about once they have beer in hand,
Yeah.
that they cannot leave
I
a
think
certain
that seems
area
to
with the
be-
beer in hand.
Yeah, so
yeah.
they shouldn't be just walking off, or you should have some sort of, whether it's subtle, but some sort of enclosure, I think. Carl, Michael, did you want to?
Just maybe as a suggestion, I don't know if this, would help address some of your concerns and issues while still, providing enough space to do what you want to do. But, if you're thinking about the corner spot and the layout, there's the shed, and then there is a stone dust path that goes to the shaded area, and maybe, as you're looking towards Cherry Street, you designate the area to the left of that as the place where alcohol can be consumed. You could get it from the shed, you could go over to that area, and you could cordon that off with tape, rope, whatever. That's a pretty wide area, a pretty large area, but, I don't know if that's gonna work for.
I would just say that the concern then is, there's gonna be food trucks every day that there's beer here, right? So you're gonna wanna take your food. I mean, I know when Fireflies was here, they had a table set up over by the food truck, but most people went to the shaded seating areas to have their meal. And they then if they had a beer, they brought their beer with them. I mean, if we could do something basically telling people they need to stay within the grassed area of the corner spot, and you can't go onto the sidewalks, and you can't go into the, you can't go onto the sidewalks and you can't go into the parking lot, I think that would allow Zealous to do what they want, but also allow us to have events where if people want to have their beer while they're playing cornhole or listening to music or, or going and sitting on the pergolas, I mean, there was never an issue, and I get your point, Joe, that when it was Fireflies, people were there for the Fireflies food, and some of them just happened to have a beer.
Right.
Well, we don't know the food trucks, but there will be food trucks there. So it's gonna be a joint venture between, the
Yeah,
beer.
but I do think that it's feasible to accommodate all this and still have an area that is
I think
designated.
I'm just saying, let it be a little bit wider area.
We can
Let
do
it be
that. I'm
Let
not-
it be to me, it's,
Well,
let it be the corner spot around the grass, and, you can't go out to the sidewalks and you can't go out to the parking
Well,
lot.
for me, I think it needs to be a little bit more, I think we can define it a little bit smaller than that, rather than just all of it. And I think it's feasible. There's enough, seems to me there's enough space to do that.
So how do we do, it's probably not something we do at this meeting, do we? I mean, should we be talking about them coming back with a plan? Do we have that kind of time, or?
I think you need to do,
Okay.
Need
you
to
need to make a
vote.
decision tonight.
Make it
Why do we need to make a decision? We have a meeting next week. I mean,
We are
is
meeting
it
next
feasible
week.
to come back with a somewhat different plan? And we can, I don't think there's any issue with accommodating the one-day licenses. That's not the issue. I think the issue is, just what's the footprint? And I don't think it's unreasonable, given every other public event that I've been to, there's always a footprint involved.
Yeah, so it's a question about what the footprint is, what the size of the footprint is, and then how you delineate where the edge of the footprint is, and whether that's by a hard rope, quote unquote, entrance into the area, or it's a little softer, right? Are you
Come
guys?
back with a proposal. You don't have to necessarily, come back with something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've given you a proposal. Whether that works for you, I don't know. Whether that works for you,
Well,
I don't know.
Yolanda also kind of spelled out, I think, more or
Well,
less the corner spot as.
But that doesn't, I mean, just respectfully, that doesn't seem like that's going to work
Oh, is
for
it?
some of the members of the board.
Well, as long as it's delineated and people understand where they should be staying, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, because even I think about the VFW, their beer tent, you bought it in the beer tent, but you were able to exit the beer tent in the back to listen to the music.
I
And you
confessed
were
I
able to
did
get
that.
out into the front of it,
Yeah, I
and you were able to get to the front of it to get to the
Right.
food trucks that were there. So even though the tent was there, and that's where the beer was being served, you could go out of that tent to get to the music and to get to the food, which gave it a much wider space,
So
which why,
maybe-
for
Listen, we
me,
also wanna-
doing the
where
corner
this-
spot makes sense.
And the other thing too is this isn't, I mean, respectfully, this is about the beer, but it's not all about the beer.
Right.
So we also want to allow for these 2 weeks to do some great community events. We want to have music there. We want people to feel like they can come there even if they don't want to have a beer.
So maybe we should have
So-
a detail there instead.
I was
If
just
we're
gonna-
gonna put if we're gonna say
Right.
all the green space, then
I was just gonna make that
accommodate
recommendation.
a detail and
Okay.
let them manage it as well.
I was just gonna make that recommendation.
Right.
If you wanna keep it up as an
So
open
is
pub
that
area.
something that fits into your business model?
Well, that kind of adds an
That's
expense.
towards expense.
How much does a detail cost for all those
You have
hours?
to talk to the chief.
It's what-
Depends upon the day.
A lot.
Yeah,
So it will be significant.
That's gonna-
I think that may be asking a lot. If
That's
there's-
asking a lot.
Well, he's asking a lot from us.
Asking that much.
Well, so, Carl,
I-
did you?
Well, I don't know, I agree with some of, what?
I was just gonna say about the detail, you're gonna have a really, really tough time filling a detail
I would
on
think so,
Marathon
too,
Monday.
yeah.
Oh, there's
Right.
that.
It seems to me that it's a little intimidating to have a detail at the corner
Yeah,
spot. That's
really.
just my initial response. I think that we can find some happy medium where we can rope something off, give people enough room to relax, and not have people going up and down Cherry Street and Main Street carrying beers or
Well, it's-
visiting
it's a
people's
violation
yards
of our
having
bylaws.
beers.
It's-
And
Public drinking, there's no public drinking, so, they have to stay within that parameter. If they're not, then they're open up to a
Well,
violation.
and that's what we're saying, but you don't know that unless it's cordoned off.
Well, I understand that, so if Mr. Better doesn't want that to happen, and he would like to keep it as an open area, I mean, there has to be a give and take here, there has to be some compromise.
Sure.
So, I guess that's what we're trying to figure out.
So my
What is the happy
suggestion-
medium? What's the
Right. Well, I
compromise?
think, I suggest he come back next week with, or send us a plan. I don't know, people even need, we could look at it without him here even.
Well, do we have a detail at the,
Yes, they do.
but I haven't even finished what I'm saying yet.
Oh,
At the, whatever it
With
was.
the
that you-
VFW?
I don't
There was,
recall
there
one.
was- there was an auxiliary there, whether or not that was part of the,
No, there was traffic,
officers there.
there was somebody doing
Yeah.
traffic there, I thought.
At the VFW?
Maybe.
No, we had somebody at the tent.
Oh, you did?
It was Officer Miri,
Okay.
so. Yeah.
yeah.
And that was a pretty large event, though. I mean, time limited, yeah.
one.
So I don't know, for this kind of casual come by, that would, I think, be expensive. Carl, any other, well,
No, I
do we have
think we
a?
are meeting next Wednesday. I'm not sure why we have to make a decision tonight, but I think it would be a good, I think we ought to get this right, and I think if it means we have to spend another 5 days, then, or 6
I mean,
days.
if you want it cordoned off so that people can actually then go to the porch swings and then
Yeah.
sit on the tables, then we can just rope off that grassy area right there.
Right.
We would have to leave some opening though, so that people that aren't drinking beer feel like they can still go in there
Mhm.
though
Sure.
and listen to
Mhm.
Yeah.
music and get to the
Make
porch
sure it
swings.
works and, yeah.
So you,
Because it still will be open to the public.
so Beth,
Um,
you're talking about, looking at the shed, this section that's over in this area here where I think, Michael, you,
It's the same area.
Where the
that same
seating
area
area
there.
is.
Now, I would
And
also.
we can cord it off with rope, we can cord it off with orange tape,
Tape
or if you have other ideas,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not aesthetically pleasing at all, and it,
So in terms of a food truck, normally the food trucks have been in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Is it feasible to have a food truck a food truck?
yeah, so the trailer that I've talked with is Dennis Provincial.
Yeah.
He has a brand-new trailer, it does need to be hooked up to electricity, so it would actually hook up
So
to
it'd
the
have
shed,
be a bud-
and it would go right up to,
Okay.
like, right on
so
that
would
grassy
kinda
area on
tie
the
in,
side.
would make it would-
Which is fine, but people wouldn't necessarily have to bring their beers to get the food, so we don't even really need to, I mean, we don't have to
Because there's
include
no
that in there.
seating where the food truck is right now. I mean, unless.
No, and there
you're not-
won't be.
and you're not
And there will
adding
not be,
seating, right.
no. If anything, we would add a couple cafe tables right outside the shed.
Right.
There's a nice new patio there that the Boy Scouts, that one of our Boy Scouts did for his Eagle Scout project. So it might look nice there, a couple cafe tables, and then there will be seating inside the shed as well.
Okay, that works.
So up to you, if you trust us to decide on what we could cord this off with, but as long as we designate that area, I mean, I think that we could work that
And I
out.
think would you agree it's a sufficient size, I mean, for,
So from the shed in back of the pergolas, along that grassy area, into the seating area where the tables are.
And then there's grassy area right
and
next
other
to the seating
grassy
area,
and up
to the
stone
path.
path.
So it would include the Adirondack chairs, you know where the Adirondack chairs are, those would be included.
Yeah.
So is
Not the kids' area.
is Dennis Provincial's trailer, his food tent, well, his food truck,
Also just not the kids' area.
not this
would
area?
Just
that
not
be
the kids'
right
area.
next to the shed itself?
Yes,
Okay.
Because it needs
it would not be in the
electricity.
parking lot
So
this
it won't be in
time.
the parking lot, so it'll be
Not this
in
one.
the stone pathway?
Yes.
Right up in that area there?
Yes.
So are
Right,
we
okay.
thinking
Yeah, I wouldn't say
just-
it's a pathway, though. That's
you thinking
Nadine's
No, no,
Um,
but it's in
driveway.
that area.
But
Yeah.
on the grass by
Yep.
Nadine's driveway.
Just this or this and this? What are you saying?
Just,
Just this?
I think it's
Just the,
I'm pretty sure there's a plumbing and all that.
She said this is what Dennis is gonna put his
Right, this is the food, this is where the food truck is gonna
Right.
go.
Right.
because the shed, it actually, the path goes like straight
all right, got it.
It's like a little off that diagram.
Yeah.
All right, so, sounds like we
Okay.
kind of have
Area.
an idea, at least in our head. Do,
And
need a written plan to look at for this, or
I
do
don't think
people
so.
feel we can
we
somehow
can
describe
trust
this?
Beth
We can
to
trust
set
Beth
it up.
to work with that, yeah.
Trust in that.
Okay.
do you want a hard rope, by the way? Do you, not a hard rope, but do you want literally a rope there? Or you want it,
Well, what do you
Describe
have?
ex-
What do you have as a?
we have ropes, we have bollards with ropes,
That would
and it'd
be
be
That would be
quite,
perfect.
and they got sticks in them.
Are
with
they
sticks, but-
electrified?
Similar to what
or-
you did when you did the
Yes.
marathon.
Yeah,
You
we have a lot
You
of
had
them.
your tent, and then you had your ropes around it, and that distinguished where
That'd be
people
perfect.
could be.
Yep.
That will work.
Good. Right. Joe, did you have anything?
No,
see
I
you
just-
studying this and.
Well, I'm studying it because I want to make sure it's done right, so that way we don't have an issue, so it's successful. I just don't want this to come back to bite us in the butt. That's the number one thing, okay? Because we're the ones that sanction it, we're the ones doing it, and it's gonna, if something happens, we're gonna
Well-
have to answer for it.
Well, I think the other thing
Because of
is,
the
if
licensing authority.
anything, I mean, I think we should maybe put in there that if something happens during the first week, that we then
You
could
come back and
possibly
entertain.
nix your second week, right? Because then it's on you to make sure that things happen appropriately the first week.
I am fine with that.
Okay.
Now,
I mean,
I'm-
I'm not, I want,
I'm not expecting anything to happen, but I think
All right.
we
I
can
mean,
certainly be
you know,
aware.
our brand is associated with this, so,
Right.
and our
Of
license, and our
course.
license, you know, we have
Joe, did you-
responsibilities to
you
make
have
sure
something
this
you wanted
works.
to add, or-
just one other thing is now, you're doing this as a case study to see how your product goes and whether, you know, it's an accepted,
market
you know,
for
for it's a
international,
marketing
yeah.
thing. And hopefully it's successful, and we hope that, this, you know, a yearly thing, but I'd like to see you come into town on a regular basis and, you know, put a brick and mortar building up and become part of our community instead of a, you know, a 2-week pop-up, you know, venture.
He wants to see you here.
So,
Very good.
that's the bottom, well, we thought that was gonna happen a couple of years ago, but it didn't, so. you know,
Well,
this is the test case again. You know, well, you know how I am, I just,
where
you
do
know,
you
okay.
brew
you're
your
you're
beer
about
now?
as patient
What's
as
that?
I am.
Where do you brew your beer now?
Yeah,
We actually don't, we have, it's complicated, but we are based in Medfield, but we're not actually open to the public. We
That's
have,
where your
Your brewery is in Medfield, but
well,
not.
we actually contract brew out of Ipswich, but we technically have a brewery license for Medfield. We just don't
Okay.
operate a tap room out of there. We also, brewing is a lot about how big your equipment is, and our equipment's not big enough in Medfield.
There's a lot of site work, for lack of a better term, that has to happen to bring a brewery.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's something that we've, you know, actively talked about how, you know,
Need a
that could
water
that could
source.
happen.
It costs at least $1 million to open a brewery, quite honestly. Like, if you want to open a decent tap room and a decent brewery and actually make a go of it, you need substantial investment.
You could give him a BAA grant.
So if you guys give me $1 million, then I will move to Ashland.
Well, we're gonna give you certainly
that?
some
We're gonna give you the
rope here
2
to work
weeks to-
with.
Yeah, there you go.
we hope it
All right.
doesn't hang you something.
Actually,
So-
he's gonna bring the
That
rope.
way.
All right, so can I get?
Not too
a-
much. okay.
I'm gonna
So
make
there's a motion,
all
all
right?
right, you've been thinking
All
about
right,
this,
so
okay,
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
make a motion, I want to incorporate what Yolanda just said in terms of being a good citizen. So, I move that we approve, as presented, I guess it's 14 one-day alcohol licenses to Zella's Beer Company at the Corner Spot. And subject to all things being done appropriate and appropriate, we will assume that the one-day licenses will go for those 14 days, but it might be subject to reconsideration. If not,
Shouldn't answer.
and it will be placed and cordoned off or roped off, as we discussed, with the 2 blocks of green space at the corner spot.
Sunday from 12 o'clock.
What did I miss?
Doesn't get until
No, that's the longest motion.
You got all that? Yeah.
Second.
All
I
the-
would like,
Do you have, motion's been,
I
uh-oh.
was just wondering, could we make an amendment on Sunday to make it 1 o'clock instead of 12? Make it 1 to 7 instead of 12 to 6?
Because.
Because of, there's one church service that's, doesn't get out till 1 o'clock.
Sunday, 1 to 6.
That's-
It's not a
that's fine with
Puritan
me.
thing. I just don't want to get a phone call from one of the good fathers and saying, hey, what are you doing?
So
the That's all.
Sunday, 1 o'clock?
Maybe it'll
Yeah,
stop
1
by.
to
So
7.
is there 2
1 to 7.
Sundays? So 2 Sundays,
2
1 to
Sundays.
7?
Instead of 12 to 6.
Oh, 1 to 6 is fine. We don't want to.
Six
You don't
is
want
okay,
to
you
go
don't want to be
past 6 o'clock.
Yeah, and we found that
Noon's a little
sometimes when
early.
businesses pop up, they have to adjust their hours. I mean, if he's sitting there in the dark with no one there, he's obviously not.
Yeah, we kind of went with the longer hours. We can, of course, shorten.
So
Okay.
that actually, I mean, I'll second that, but before we vote, some discussion. What are you doing for lighting from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock? Because it's still dark out at that time, during that time of year, and there's no lights there.
We have started discussing that.
Okay.
This is where we may actually just end up being inside the building at that
Okay.
time, just so you know.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
we have talked about lighting a little bit. Lighting can be expensive, but
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So the motion's been made,
And
it's
second.
been modified for the
Sundays
two
at 1
Sundays,
o'clock.
1 to 6,
And I've seconded
and
it.
there's been a
All right,
second.
there has been a second, all right, all those in favor of granting these 14 one-day licenses as, with the conditions described, say aye.
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 Opposed? None? Congratulations, your motion
Congratulations,
carries.
good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Now, let's hope there's no
Thank you, Beth.
snowstorms.
Oh, yeah, April
Well, you didn't
13th.
say it.
Thank you.
What?
All right,
We've had snow in April.
yes, April Fools.
April
yep.
1st.
That's right.
Okay, the next
the
is the
Sunday.
consent agenda.
Mhm.
And is anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
No.
Yeah, I'd like to pull letter F.
Letter
from the
F.
consent,
And
yes.
I had made two, on item B, I had asked two changes to the minutes, so I had sent that to Diane. I guess I'll just have to, so I'll have to pull item B, I guess. Anything else?
No.
For the consent agenda. Should I read the consent agenda? We don't have it on the screen. People are looking at me. I can skip reading the consent agenda.
Okay, move to approve the consent agenda as,
Do I have a second to,
Items B and F.
without, to approve the consent agenda without items B and F?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. So, item B, the minutes, I guess I had sent this in, but the only thing I want to say about, on the February 21st minutes, I just wanted to add, this is when I made the statement on Parkland, and and it just says, our thoughts and prayers, but I thought it was important to add, and the need for concrete action. So I did send that to Diane. So I thought that was important, so I'd ask people to accept that change to the minutes there. So do I have a motion to
I
accept
move
the
that we
revised?
accept the meeting minutes for February 7th and 21st as amended.
Second on that?
second.
All those in favors? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, minutes are
One
accepted.
abstained.
One abstention. Oh, sorry, it's
You have to abstain just 'cause you weren't there.
4-0-1, one abstention. Okay, so then, Steve, item F?
Item F, I wanted to pull, only because I think we should publicly thank the Greater Ashland Lions Club. We have two active, very active Lions clubs in Ashland, the Ashland Lions Club and the Greater Ashland Lions. And in this case here, the Greater Ashland Lions Club is donating a bench at Wildwood Cemetery. And I think it's just
Oh, very
appropriate
nice.
for us to publicly acknowledge that and to thank them and give them our best wishes and appreciation from the citizens of Ashland.
Now, I know the Lions
good point.
also donated additional benches that are seen throughout town.
The Ashland Lions donated those 4 benches.
There's one by the post office.
Yep.
That, when I dropped my mail off, I saw it, but there was also another plaque above it, and it said, donated by the Open Space Committee.
That's the old bench that was
That's
there.
the old bench that was there. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so the newer one
The
is,
new one is, yeah.
okay.
And I'll have to take a look. I noticed the new bench. I didn't notice I saw the Ashland Lions donated by, but
Yep.
the original bench that was there was from Open Space and Rec.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I would make a motion that we approve the donation of a beautiful bench for Wildwood Cemetery from the Greater Ashland Lions Club.
Do I hear a second? Second, motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Greater Ashland Lions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're on to old new business. So, I don't know, Michael, you wanna, who's Upper Charles Trail Subcommittee update, which is actually you guys, so.
Yes, so I, just to update the board real quick, We had our first joint subcommittee meeting on February 22nd. We discussed a review, or we had a review of the proposed trail with potential modifications, connection points at the various borders. We discussed a list of issues and concerns that the Board of Selectmen had presented to the Upper Charles Trail Committee. We had a discussion on easement and the mechanism for potentially addressing these easements. And then, and that was really the gist of it. We had a meeting scheduled for the 8th, which got snowed out. We're meeting next Tuesday. That'll be our second meeting. At this point, this is my opinion. I think we could get maybe one or two more meetings, and I think we would have a good handle on how to proceed from here. And at that point, we would probably need to meet as two full Upper Charles Committee and Board of Selectmen to kind of start to dig into this and figure it out, how we're gonna make this happen. So, that's it. And then, I think we mentioned earlier about, and you might want to address the complete streets.
Right.
if-
So just a couple things to follow up on what Steve said in regards to the full board. One of the next steps we have to take as our board, and after we do this work, is to then approve and say, okay, this is the path that we think is appropriate, that we want to vote on to then move forward to make it happen. They did go through and give a list of streets that could be impacted by the trail, and those have been put forward to the Complete Streets group, so they're gonna be put on that list. As Sheila mentioned, High Street, Cross Street, and
Yeah, there's a number of them.
there was another one that also people are looking for sidewalks, so if we're looking to put a trail there anyway, how can we coordinate those together? But as Steve said, I think we've made some progress, we just haven't had a chance
Sure.
to meet a second time, but that's where we're at.
Good. And, I was there for at least the initial meeting with the whole committee. I thought that was a
Yeah,
very
that was
good
a very good
process. And we
process.
had a great follow-up with the Complete Streets, and
Mhm.
so that's good. Now, in terms of your review of the route, how are you guys feeling about, do you think there's a lot of big issues to resolve, or what's your kind of feeling having gone through that, at least initially?
Yeah.
I don't want you to get ahead of yourself,
Well-
but do you think we're gonna come up with something fairly soon that you think we can kind of unite behind, or?
Well, that's my hope, and,
Right.
I think this is it's an important project. I think it's, certainly something that, would be, enhance the quality of life in Ashland. So, that aside, we all recognize the challenges here with routing a trail through Ashland, and the fact that we're so built out and so on. But besides that, there's also the connectivity with our abutting towns, and there's challenges there as well. And one of the things we talked about at the committee is that there's in Hopkinton, there's actually two trails committees. So who do we interface with?
Coordinate with.
And who is the appropriate, where are they in this process? So there's coordination on that side. And you've brought up, several times the challenges of easements and, how do we handle
Sure.
that? What's the mechanism for communicating with landowners and?
Who should be doing that?
Right, and again, what is the reality of putting a trail from, any particular portion of town? There's challenges
Yeah.
there, as we know.
Carl, Joe, did you guys wanna?
No, I can't wait to see what the final product's gonna look like.
Okay, and I think your main challenge is the route. I mean, really, to figure out what is at least the preferred route, and kind of have everybody kind of agree on that. If we can come out of this process with that, well, it would be a major.
And then the other layer on that is, we're also looking at our downtown. And part of the route is going through part of downtown.
Exactly.
So how do we tie all these different projects that are going on at the same time to make sure that we coordinate well between all of them. And I think that's the other
Yeah.
sort of,
Yeah.
That's what's good.
and we sort of have to wait for things, right? We're having our downtown forum on March 29th. And the question has
Oh,
been
yeah.
put out to people, bike path, parking, things like that. And that in itself will create discussion. But then how do you tie that into where the path is going and what the route is and what streets are affected? And, okay, downtown is this area, but the path is gonna be, so there's a lot of moving parts. I think we are getting to it. We are moving forward slowly. I would say that hopefully by May, the latest, we should have an ability for the two groups to get together and look at what the new, what the path is.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge, Rob, is that, it's easy to say, let's pick out some low-hanging fruit and make it, start it. But, there's not a whole lot of low-hanging fruit here
Right.
to work
We
on.
thought we
It's
had the
all
dike
challenge,
path, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we've got
No
our work.
low-hanging fruit. All right, so thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
All right, so Michael, you wanted to talk about the 2019 budget.
Sure. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Per the charter, we're actually supposed to have the 2019 budget voted on last week. As you know, our meeting got postponed because of the snowstorm.
Storm,
So, it's here before you tonight. No changes from what was
Okay.
presented to you before. Just to go over a couple of the highlights, you see a large percentage in dollar amount reduction in economic development. Again, that is because we took out the money that we had put in this year for Cadillac paint, which we won't need because Cadillac paint is actually, moving forward this year. But then we also have a business incentive program that will be funded through that. Next, if you go down to the Council on Aging and Youth and Family Services, you will see an increase of almost 14%. Again, that is for an assistant recreation director, and then also the addition of hours to Kim Katab, who is our volunteer director at the community center. You'll see, I'll talk about the public library, which you'll see is a small increase, and then public buildings and property maintenance, which, from a percentage basis is a small increase as well. But they're related because what we did is we took out, if you remember last year, we had funded a part-time custodian in the library budget. And so it was more appropriate to move that into the facilities budget, which we are doing in 2019.
Okay, that makes
But then
sense.
we are also adding hours to the library as well. So we'll be adding an additional 5 hours to the library, keeping us open all day on Monday.
Can you address 1510? 8% increase?
The Board of Health, so that is, you see an increase there primarily because of the increase in contracted services for the landfill monitoring
Okay.
contract that we have. We also have some money in there for coverage for when Mark is away. Highway construction and maintenance, you'll see that's an increase of $51,000. $50,000 of that is dedicated to doing a stormwater management plan.
So that you've started to incorporate some of the stormwater requirements into the regular budget here, at least
Well, I think that's
initially.
about as much as anything that, as much as we're gonna be able to do on that one. And again, I still don't think it's the most appropriate place for it, but I think that's a discussion for, in advance of another town meeting. So just going over on the back sheet where you have group health insurance, you'll see that that's a significant increase. The rates did come in a little bit lower, and we're looking at, how that might play out and how we could adjust things, but we probably won't know that until the fall town meeting. And, I will mention the municipal efficiency program. You'll see that's a reduction of $25,000. We're seeing it used, just not to the $50,000 level.
Okay.
So we've got
Okay.
a number of programs, but, and I can give an update on that in the future. The enterprise funds, you'll see a pretty large increase in the sewer enterprise budget from a dollar standpoint and then also a percentage standpoint. That is directly attributable to the costs associated with the Framingham IMA, and then also the treatment costs.
Did their fee, did that go up, Michael?
It did go up. Well, the Framingham fee did not, like, the rate did not go up. What we're having is more sewage.
There's more- you're right,
yeah,
so there's
going
more-
through, yeah.
right,
And then field management, that's just an increase, related to regular field operations. That being said, especially on, I want to point out on the water, sewer, and trash, and really field management at this point, we're not anticipating any rate increases. So sewer might be the one that we have to look at once we get the final bill.
Not necessarily a budget question, but well, a long-term planning. Field management, how are we doing with reserves for the replacement?
Where I don't have the clearest answer on that yet for you tonight here. I
Okay.
can certainly get it.
Okay,
My recollection from the last time, Doug and I have had a discussion about that, it's not where it needs to be.
okay.
What we're seeing is that what, was pitched in terms of how much the operational costs would be, were not necessarily, I don't think they were meant to be inaccurate, I just think they were inaccurate. And so what's
Meaning
happened.
It's costing us more
It's
to
costing us
maintain
more to
them?
maintain
More
them
to
than what
maintain.
we had anticipated, and as such, we're not able to put more money back into the
Carl,
reserves.
did you have?
Yeah, just to follow up on Yolanda's question, and then I have a question on the budget. What about the field rentals? How is that working? That
So,
was-
they're being rented,
I mean,
we don't-
is that where it was anticipated or not where it was anticipated, or? I know that was an issue a while back.
Yeah, I really don't feel comfortable giving you an answer on that right
Could we
now.
get an
Yeah,
update on
that's
that
something
next
you
meeting?
could just send
Yeah.
out to the board, maybe.
Yeah.
I think we're all kind of curious about how the fields are working out and what's going on with them.
Well, we've had, a couple years ago, we decided to, basically disband the fields management group, decided to put that under the Department of Public Works and,
Right.
and Public Buildings. We've had some changeover in both of those departments, as well as the, facilities people over at the school department as well. So, I know when Doug came in, he had some real concerns, and really kind of, triage the situation when he got there in terms of, I think there was some deferred maintenance that had been happening.
Big time.
And so he had to bring things up to, a certain standard. But, it's something, and we've talked about it, before at these meetings, the fact that we, this really needs to stay on our radar screen, and we need to address it, not just from a 2019 budget standpoint, but also a policy and long-term planning standpoint.
So I
What-
think it's,
Can I finish? 1171, could you comment on that bump?
Oh, the Conservation Commission?
Yeah.
Um,
it Seems to be the same in 17 and 19 and raised in 18.
So what we did was, so what happened there is we had actually put money in there for stormwater to do the Kleinfelder analysis that's currently happening right now, and so we don't need that anymore. That was in contracted services.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Steve?
I was just to go back to the fields, I think, to get some understanding of how often the fields are getting rented, are the fees in
Covering it.
balance with the market? I think one of the challenges is that every community now has turf fields.
Yep.
So I'm sure everybody's doing the same thing with trying to rent out their fields.
Well, that's, yeah, I think when it was presented,
At the time, there weren't a whole lot at that time, but it was, shortly thereafter, there were a lot more turf fields, so.
yeah,
we-
in a town or city like Marlboro, with its direct access right off of 495, and, they certainly have a geographical advantage, but it's something that we're gonna need to look into. I do wanna just say with capital, so we'll have the capital presentation, on April 4th. Brittany and Jen will be giving that, and Doug, will be there giving that. But it's, it fits within the 750 pay-as-you-go appropriation for the spring.
Okay.
And trying to think if there's anything, oh, the school department, you know, there was a small discrepancy about a month ago. The school department was able to bring their budget back in line with, well, just where it needs to be, or where it needed to be, and I believe they have voted on that, so. That's
Okay.
it.
Very good.
And after this is done, Brittany can put together the budget book. She's already done a lot of that work, but in terms of the analysis and everything, she has to wait until it's voted on.
All right, so I think I need a motion. Oh, go ahead,
Just
Carl.
two
Joe.
quick things. The bump in the police and fire, are those contractual raises or no?
No, that is, no, well, actually, in a way it is because of some of the
Incentives, yeah.
incentives, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I don't know.
some people are earning more of the
Interesting.
incentives.
Yep, okay, for their bumps, got it. Okay. And I'm assuming that our snow and ice removal to date
Oh, very good.
is far above the 285,000 that was.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. We had a conversation about that today, yes. We are going to be over.
What else is
It's
new?
I know.
safe to say.
I know.
I'm sorry, what are we gonna be over?
Snow and ice.
Snow
Oh,
and
snow
ice.
and ice. Oh, what a surprise.
All
Okay.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I need a motion to approve the 2019 budget as presented
So
here
moved.
tonight.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the 2019 budget, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. Budget is approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and
Thanks.
thank you,
Thank
Brittany,
you,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
for all the work
Yes.
done.
Brittany
All right.
does most of this now, so, you
Oh,
know,
that's
she
good.
really deserves the lion's
So
share.
we should take the
Right.
thank yous away from you? Is that-
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine.
So, all right, so the next one is discussion of future agenda items, and I think things are kind of crowded as we head up to town meeting, so I think we thought it was a good idea to just kind of go over our schedule and what's happening. I think this is a good opportunity for me to say, you know, I pulled the medical marijuana off the agenda for tonight. I thought, because we could use the time, frankly, to do a little more research on our own and finish up with that. And I think, you know, Michael's schedule was impacted by these storms and the fires and everything. So, but I do want to say to people, you know, we're going to deal with this. And I think I want to get a sense from the board and from Michael. I think if we're ready to put this on the agenda for next week and have, you know, a discussion on that, listen to what people may want to say to us, have enough time to do it. And then I think, in fairness, both to Michael, the residents, and the company, Tricom, that we be prepared to give Michael direction on what he should do with, you know, does he go back and negotiate and come back with a deal, or do we let it, maybe there's some uncertainties, we'll let it go for a while, or we're going to say, this is not something we're going to do, you know, that's what so I think the question is, we feel we're pretty much ready to do that next Wednesday. The sense of the board on that? Do you agree that we should put it on the agenda and deal with it?
So just as a point of clarification, Robin, excuse me if you
Sure.
mentioned this, I think you wanted to have the board wanted to have two separate discussions. First of all, a discussion about medicinal marijuana in Ashland, period, number one. And then, you know, the pros and cons of that and whether that's something you want to move forward with. And then subsequent to that, you know, if it is something that you want to do and explore, continue the discussions with Tricom. And, you know, you've already given me some good, solid feedback on what you would like to see in that host community agreement. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and have this general discussion about it first. So just,
Okay. So-
if I was incorrect in that, you know, how you want to structure that, you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Sounds good.
Thoughts?
Yeah,
People,
should,
comments?
I agree. That was my understanding in the first place, is that we were gonna have a general discussion, not so general, but not as specific as we were going into the last meeting, that we were gonna have a post-presentation discussion about that presentation in general terms before we went forward and negotiated an agreement. And so if that's what you're saying, I would agree with that.
Other, yeah, Steve?
I would, that certainly is fine in terms of, obviously, we've had a small number, actually, of residents that have voiced some opinions at this point, and, I think it's just important that we try to have as balanced a discussion about this subject as possible. I know there's emotion involved and there's anecdotal information involved, but there is a lot of data out there in a variety of issues, and I would just suggest that we try to have as balanced a conversation, and we also try to encourage other input from residents, and
Sure.
As much as possible. I think that's important. I think that's what we're trying to do here, and I think also it would probably help if we kind of put some definition into really what we're discussing. Are we going to discuss the viability of medical marijuana as opposed to the issues of, let's say, real estate values or community values or location and so on? So, how broad or how defined do we want to make the conversation? So,
All right.
I think that we need to get, and I think that you asked Michael to speak to council about this. There's so much ambiguity surrounding this that every time someone speaks, it seems like something has changed. And I think that we need to get clarification before we make these decisions, that we can't make clear decisions when we have ambiguous information.
agreed.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's
Ron.
okay, go ahead.
I
Can I
agree with
just
you on that.
caution everybody, one thing, I did take it off the agenda, so let's try to stick to the process questions, if we
Well,
can, right?
the process is very simple. I mean, we're waiting for feedback from the Cannabis Commission as to how they want to see things structured, and they can't even make a determination. So that's leaving us, in the lurch with respect to some of the things that we have to make decisions on. So how do you make those decisions before the state comes up with their regulations that may,
Right.
whatever we decide to do, may
Right,
conversely
the only thing I'd say, I
go
think you're
against,
speaking to the merits of our actions.
well,
What I think we can do tonight is kind of lay out the process of how we're going to approach it. So so assuming we talk about this next week, that would be one of the things I think we should talk about.
Well, we can talk in general terms. So, one of the questions I know that has been batted back and forth is if a medicinal dispensary opens, can it automatically convert to recreational? I mean, we really don't have a definitive, we have people saying yes and people saying no. Well, somebody's got to be wrong.
So let's
So
talk-
we need
yeah.
some clarification on that generally
Right.
before we
And I
talk
have
about
requested-
Trichome
and
specifically.
I did say requested town council give us a written
She'll be
opinion
providing that.
on the kind of legal, so hopefully we'll have that by next week, or
Yeah,
soon?
I'm hoping to have it by tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Lisa was gonna be out of town, so it was gonna be a
Right.
little bit difficult, but, I mean, if you don't mind me,
Sure.
if you don't mind me just expounding on that a little bit, just because Lisa and I have had a conversation, because the board has expressed a concern about the viability of a marijuana facility being able to convert to a recreational facility. And, the fact is that has never been tested in court, right? So I guess there's going to be some ambiguity until that happens. But I can tell you what our defense would be.
Michael, we haven't put this on the agenda, though. I'm just kind of
Okay.
concerned that,
I'm fine with,
know,
oh, that's fine.
we took it off or I
You're
took
right.
it off the agenda, so I
You're
kind of
right.
feel responsible that, we
Well,
stay within the bounds
You
of.
took Trichome off the agenda.
Well-
And we're talking about how we're going to approach this next time.
I
Yeah.
think better safe.
Yeah.
I think prudent.
All right, so-
I think,
go ahead,
just to
Yolanda.
say that I think that, as Michael said, a general discussion about medical marijuana in Ashland, because we have the zoning for it, and we have, as a town, we approved it, but as Steve said, we've gotten feedback from people. But I think at our next meeting, have a discussion, allow the public to give their opinion, and have a discussion on medical marijuana. We then should hopefully have an answer from Lisa, and/or from the Cannabis Commission, in regards to if they have more guidance as to what to do if you have a medical, you know, because there's two options, right? You decide to do medical, but you opt out recreational. Can they still do recreational? Or if, you know, even if you have an agreement in place where they have to come back to somebody. So I think that's the
So let's,
ambiguity we're
so I
dealing
think
with.
I'm getting the sense that it's on the agenda for next week. We'll get as much information as we can, and we should put aside some time, because people, I think, will want to
Definitely.
come in and talk about it. And we're there with that. So that agenda item. Anybody else? Steve, did you want to say anything, or?
No.
All right. And I think the subject is going to be kind of general, medical
General,
marijuana
yep.
in Ashland. What do we think? All right.
Right.
Okay. All right, other agenda items to discuss under this?
I have a couple. I think we've heard, not from a lot of people, but from a couple of people about our public and civic engagement and how
Oh,
we
yes.
work with people.
Mhm.
I know we have a lot going on between now and town meeting, but I certainly think, depending on who's sitting here, hopefully I'm one of them, after the May election, I'd like us to take a little further discussion. Maybe it's a subcommittee, talk about how we can improve some of our public and
Sure.
civic engagement. I think there's benefit to that. We're certainly doing in little ways. We go out to the farmer's market, we all try to get to a lot of events, but how can we be a little more proactive on that?
Are you thinking that's a June kind of thing, or July?
Yeah, June, July, I
Yeah.
think.
Can I comment on that, Yolanda, a little bit? I know that it was one of the points in our vision statement was to
Right.
create a citizens advisory council.
Yep.
So that might be something that we could bring in at
Bring
that
in there.
time.
Yep.
And
I have,
just-
hold on, I have two more. Just as a discussion, at the regional selectmen meeting that I was at, they had a discussion about town meeting voting.
Yeah.
So it might be, again, not between now and May, but again, if I'm sitting here, certainly these are things in the future to talk about. There was discussion about electronic voting and other ways to vote. So I think it could just be a discussion. I don't know where it'll take us, but that's a possible one.
There's the whole thing of Saturday town
You know,
meeting,
cha-
that kind of
change the
stuff.
day, change
We-
what you do.
MAPC has already asked us to provide a survey that they have put together.
From
out
their
to the-
government affairs, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something, I was gonna talk about it in town manager reports, but that'll be
Yeah.
something that,
Yeah, that's a project that they're doing with Metro West Region, with the regional
Yep.
collaborative. And then the third one is regionalization. Are there other things that we could be doing in a regional way? You know, we have our regional veterans, we have with another town, our dog officer. Are there other things? I know under social issues and some of those things, we've talked about it.
Talking about the mental, the chief
So
talked
the
about
mental
the
stuff,
regional.
so
That's regional.
that's regional. Are there other things that we're doing? Is there a way with stormwater and some of the expenses that we have, that we're tying into stormwater, that they could become regional? So those are just three of the things that I thought, again,
Regionalization.
probably not before town meeting for some of them because of everything
Yeah,
else
yeah.
we're dealing with, but certainly a little more long-term.
Okay.
Would-
Michael, do you want to?
well, it's just, I thought, you know, for the benefit of this discussion and just ongoing, I would put together a list of the things that we've got coming up for, at least on the agenda that I have for the next 3 meetings. Just so you know what's coming down. First, you know, at our meeting next week, we'll have the medicinal marijuana discussion that we talked about. There's also, we should have the development agreement between the town and 128 Main Street as part of, you know, that deal that is being worked out. There's, you know, CPC's related, you know, has a role in this, but they wanted to see the development agreement first before they made a vote, but the Board of Selectmen needs to vote on the development agreement, not CPC, so that would be on there. We would do a more deep, in-depth discussion of the warrant articles. We're also going to have our auditors here. So they will be, as we do annually, so they'll be presenting the audit of the general fund and the enterprise funds. And then, we've just completed our personnel policy, so I was going to provide that to you. on
I'm
the
sorry, Mike,
report.
did you say you're thinking of the auditors for next, the 21st?
Yeah,
To the annual audit presentation? or-
yeah,
Oh,
so,
oh, that's kind
um,
of a,
That time of year.
yeah, we're Believe it or not, we're a little bit later this year than we were before. So on the 4th, Representative Lewis and Senator Spilka are planning to attend, just to kind of give an update. You know, potentially, we might want to push them out, depending on their schedule and what you have going on.
I was gonna ask, does that date work both for us and them in terms of, is this a good time to talk to them, presumably about budget, more or less, and maybe a few other things?
I think so.
I'm just kind of looking at people, okay.
You are scheduled to close the warrant on that date. Also, the ballot questions for the May 15th election need to be voted on. You should have the complete streets prioritization plan that you'll be able to review. And then also, Beth and I have been working on this business incentive program, which will be a warrant article, because it needs to be a home rule petition. So we'll give you
Boy, that's a lot.
an overview of that. And then on the 18th, we have, right now we have the BAA grants, I think needs to happen at some point. And then last but not least, town manager evaluation. I don't know what that
I was
is.
just
so.
gonna add that town manager review needs to happen by the 18th.
Kind of forgot that. I'm looking at next week now, we got the medical marijuana and some other things. Is that a good time to bring the auditors in? I mean, how much, well, let's think
think
about
so.
that one. I mean, how much time are we gonna spend
They
with that?
usually take, 20, 25
Yeah.
minutes. I mean, we should be able to provide you the audits beforehand.
Yeah, well, it's just next week.
Maybe start with them and then,
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
medical
that's
marijuana.
usually-
Well, it's just next
afterwards.
week, so,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, the stuff, you're gonna send it out, today's Thursday.
Mhm.
When are we getting all this stuff? Like tomorrow?
Small
All right.
forest is gonna disappear.
Yeah, it's pretty
When do you think the agenda's going out? When?
tomorrow.
Tomorrow sometime, so I don't know. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. That's just what I had scheduled on your plate for the next couple of meetings, so.
You're the chair, you get to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. Okay, other items that people want to think about? So that's pretty but I'm seeing around, town meetings on the 2nd, so starts at least on the 2nd.
Work for me. So, because no one else seems to be jumping up, I did have one more. Committee updates, similar how
Oh,
you
yes.
brought the Sustainability Committee in today. I think if we could add one to every
Yeah.
meeting, I think it would be very good.
After we
Yeah.
get through the
Certainly.
next two, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had spoken about that,
Yeah.
You
Robin.
mentioned it before,
Yeah.
so
We-
we
Something
need
we
to
should
start bringing them
remember.
back in.
Yeah, we should figure out how we're gonna schedule them, who's the priority. I think you mentioned the cultural council
Council.
and.
There's probably some committees we don't necessarily,
We don't want to see stormwater for a while.
we want to prioritize them, based on, we haven't heard, as an example, from Open Space and Rec in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
But
and
they're in
about
the
to be done with their
process of
plan.
They're
their
about to do
finishing their
their-
Yeah,
plan,
it'd be
so,
great to have them come with a
so
plan.
when they finish their plan, after,
Awesome.
finally, that kind of
Right.
stuff.
So I think
Yeah.
maybe between, Michael and I and the vice chair, we'll think about, it should be a constant subject that who should come in next and
Yep.
who do we need to hear from.
Well, I think over the
And-
snowstorm, we had spoken about, I'll have Susan develop
Yeah,
a draft
right.
schedule that the board could then review, and then.
Right, reach out to the committees to
yeah,
say, okay, what dates
what
would
you
be
wanna
good,
do,
what date
yeah.
would be good for you moving forward?
So I actually have one item I'd like to
Sure.
talk about. We're funding a selectmen's recognition project. So
Mhm.
both the narrative board and the plaques are done. They're downstairs, and because of all the weather, we
Mhm.
haven't been able to schedule anything. And actually, tomorrow is our incorporation
Mhm.
Yep.
anniversary, the 16th of March, 1846. So I talked to Jen and Susan about the installation. What I'd like to propose is that we pick a date for having a ceremony, a short ceremony, something before a meeting, maybe starting at 6:30, inviting in the living selectmen. I've asked Carl if he would say some words about that history. I would invite Cliff Wilson as well, because he worked with me on this, and So I'd like to suggest maybe the 4th, the April 4th meeting, and if we start a little early, we just do a quick ceremony and, move on.
6:30. Okay.
Does that make sense for folks?
Mhm.
And I can work with Susan in terms of getting, I have a list, Kim Wales and Tara and Cindy have all been helpful with compiling this information, but we do have a
Okay.
list of selectmen that are still around. We can send out invitations, and whoever shows, shows.
Right, so you think you're ready to go for that meeting?
It just needs to be installed,
All right.
right?
And get
And that's
the word out to
probably,
people.
maybe an hour project.
Do we want to plan a 6 o'clock start so that if there's residual, we can still start our meeting at 7?
I think that would
Especially
be,
because
6
we have,
o'clock? Okay.
because we have a lot
Yeah,
of
maybe
things on
And
that
it would be
agenda.
nice to have, Senator Spilka and Rep.
Rep.
Lewis
Well,
Lewis.
they'll
here.
both, they'll both be
Yeah.
there
That's a
then,
good
I
point.
guess.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, that's, that date they'll be here,
Yeah.
so maybe we can go as late as 6:15. We'll see.
oh, that's right, yeah, you,
My train schedule, but, as long as your speech isn't too long, we should get through it all.
I'm just gonna introduce
Take your
people. I'm
bike.
gonna introduce Carl and Cliff, and
That's right,
that's
nice.
all.
That's good, good work,
Yeah.
Steve.
To that point of selectmen projects, we had talked for years, actually, about the McGill Square project, and that plaque is also finished and was delivered today to Nick O'Hara.
Oh, fantastic.
And so for our target date is sometime, to have that installed sometime in May and dedicate the square before Memorial Day, so
Super.
that's done too.
And that'd be a separate from our meeting, right? The-
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, any other potential agenda items and
Snow on the ground.
anything else? Do people like the idea of discussing future agenda items as an agenda item like this? I mean, is it helpful, or do you want us to just go away and schedule things with input?
We put it on the consent agenda.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
Well, I think we have enough things now, certainly, so
all right.
that, maybe we do another one like this in the fall.
Yeah, do it periodically. Okay,
Totally.
all right, thank you. All right, next is town manager reports.
You're up. Me? I'm up? Okay.
Yeah, you're
Thank
the
you.
town manager, I think.
Could I, just one thing as we get into that, we did, we
shot.
did get that email from from some residents about the 15-day waiver period.
yeah.
I don't know if you were gonna talk about that. Just to answer that, my view of that is that selectmen basically have veto power over appointments as long as we do it within 15 days of the appointment. So normally we take no action. Sometimes we're asked to waive and affirmatively allow the hire within the 15-day appointment period. So I hope that answers that question, but
Well,
don't
I
know if
mean,
that's-
just to clarify, so, the board doesn't necessarily have veto power over the appointment. So.
According to, see, I have a, in the
You
warrant
have
and the
the-
charter, I think it's fairly clear.
So if you look at it, I notify you of the appointment.
Yeah,
And then if there's a 15-day waiting period from that notification that happens before the board, before that person starts. If we want to have that person start before that, then the board needs to waive it.
right.
And so the
No,
board
but
would be.
I do read it as, if a majority of the board says that you shouldn't hire somebody, I think we have that power. That's my reading of the charter.
Maybe we should clarify it in the charter review committee.
They
I
said
think
no
we had
about
this
that.
discussion once
Yeah.
before, didn't we?
And I was right.
Yeah, and you weren't even chair then.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So,
So yeah, well, maybe that doesn't clarify the question, but.
yeah, I know, we
I'm
didn't
not sure
really.
exactly what the concern is there, but, I don't think there's ever been, I can't remember a time when people have openly questioned a hire or tried to take any action, but.
No, but I think it's a fair point when you see the word waive on a number
Yeah.
of agenda items, that would pique
Sure.
my curiosity as well.
And then,
you know.
that's the point.
Do I think it's, extremely germane to the business of government,
Not that
as it's going on? No, but,
Okay,
so.
all right, so go ahead, Michael. with
Okay.
your report.
So, first on the agenda is just an overview of our town meeting. So again, as I mentioned before, we're scheduled to close and post the warrant on April 4th. That should give you plenty of time. We'll have a couple of a few meetings where we're able to discuss warrants, warrant articles specifically, if you want to. Typically, you have the CPC chair, Beth Rosenblum, come in, give a discussion of CPC articles. I think I'd already mentioned to you that, Beth and I will be discussing a business incentive program with you. Also provided to you the just the list so far of town meeting warrant articles. Don't know, some of these obviously are being taken off, but, if you have any questions on those.
Well, I think it might be helpful to kind of give people a preview of what we're going to be dealing with, the important ones, the big ticket items. And I don't know if you want to talk about
Sure.
public safety at all, and just where we're at that, yeah.
We'll have obviously the big budget items, so that would be the budget, FY19 budget and the capital authorization. We have a number of annual standard articles, like the annual consent article, annual authorization article, revolving funds. There's the potential of having a transfer from the SPED stabilization fund into this, in this town meeting. Superintendent Adams will have a better idea of that. We do have, a number of articles related to 133 West Union Street, which would be the vote of CPC funds, provided that CPC recommends to move forward with it. The declaration of a restrictive covenant with the Hicks family, and then also the borrowing of the funding for the project as well. We have the school feasibility study.
And that's the Valentine estate.
That's
for
the
folks,
Valentine
yeah.
estate, correct.
Yeah.
We do have the business incentive program that I mentioned before, the school feasibility study,
The school. that's another
a
one.
general bylaw related to opting out of recreational marijuana.
Yes, that's one that we've been, of course, concerned with the medical marijuana thing, but that's one that's really kind of a big issue that's a bit under the radar screen at the moment, so we're, just to review, we have a moratorium, and this would be the opt-out vote, or the first step of the opting out of allowing recreational or adult use marijuana in town. So that's
Right.
the first step.
It's the first step.
I have a question for clarification. Our moratorium is for recreational marijuana, correct? Not marijuana
It is,
across, it's
yes.
just
Correct.
recreational. Okay, thank you.
We have just a couple of small zoning articles that I believe you could classify them more as cleanup and clarification. We've got a groundwater overlay district that was related to the MWRA connection, a couple of road acceptances, and then we have a number of charter articles. And just to revisit the structure of this year's annual town meeting, the first night will be May 2nd, Wednesday. The second night will be May 8th. That will be dedicated solely to the charter articles. The moderator has indicated that, whether we get done at 11 o'clock that night or 11 o'clock in the morning, we are not leaving until we get the charter done.
Oh, boy.
And then if we have any articles remaining from the May 2nd meeting, we would have a third night of town meeting on May 10th. So get your sleeping bags ready and
Yeah.
we'll be all set.
Bring in the pizza.
Yep, bring in
So
the
that's
pizza.
a Wednesday is the first night of town meeting, Wednesday, May 2nd, and then Tuesday and Thursday the following week, May 8th and May 10th. Okay.
Wow.
Which is followed then by the following week on the 15th of our town election,
Oh, my God.
where we need to also have some of these items voted on.
Yeah, that's the other
Yes. Okay.
big part of this.
Yes.
Public safety, I don't know if you want to give people an update on what may or may not.
Well,
I don't know.
I think we wanted to try to get that building, that project, at least the engineering funding and then also the funding for the acquisition of land on this town meeting warrant as well as the town ballot, because it would be done as a debt exclusion. You know, what we have engaged in discussions with a landowner, you know, specifically about a piece of property for a public safety building. We do not have a price negotiated yet, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to move forward with it at this point in time. I think we would look at the fall. That would also give us an opportunity, I think, to do more of a public education and awareness campaign of the need for a public safety building, because I think a lot of us that are inside government and have been in for a while know the need, but not too many people, I think, outside who don't pay attention to this on an everyday basis realize how dire our condition our public safety facilities are in. So I think it's probably prudent to move it to the fall, and then that way you also don't have 3 different debt exclusions on the ballot. So a little bit disappointing in terms of where we wanted to be versus where we are, but you know, I think maybe by waiting we would actually have potentially better news, you know, and a better just a better argument, I think.
Who knows, lightning may strike.
Good.
Yeah.
And just to follow up, I think Yolanda's, May 15th, the town municipal elections will have two debt exclusions, a school, and assuming they pass, the school in the Valentine estate, plus the adult use marijuana referendum, plus municipal offices that may be contested.
That's correct.
All right, so a lot coming up.
Okay.
Thank you, that's the town meeting update. Oh, you
Sure.
want to talk about the storm and fire response?
Sure, we'll break this up in 2 parts. So just to give you a recap of the timeline from the last week. On Sunday night, we had a major fire at the Chestnut Place Apartments, 8 Joanne Drive. Burned, looks like it's a complete loss. It was a major fire incident here in town. And then we got hit with a storm that led to a number of power outages. That was complicated also by a second fire on Main Street on Friday afternoon. So those were, you know, 2 different types of incidents that we needed to respond to. I think we did a great job with both. I'll turn it over to Jen right now, who can talk about, you know, what we've done in terms of responding to those people who have been displaced and who have been impacted by the fires that have happened in town.
So as I understand it, this may be the largest fire that Ashland has seen, at least in the recent history, displacing 36 families, impacting 39 units at that location. Red Cross was on the scene with our fire department, sort of starting that initial outreach the night of the fire. So they were able to make contact with, I believe, about 16 families. The very next morning, Human Services kicked into gear, led by Jennifer Wolfing, doing outreach to as many families as they could. And the Emergency Fund was coordinating with CARA on helping the displaced families that didn't have a place to go while they found sort of long-term housing options. And so they were able to put up several families for several. So initially they basically did from the fire till this last Monday. They placed people in hotels in the area. And then after our event on Saturday, which I'll talk about, they ended up extending that for several of the families. So they have been an amazing asset in the community. They have not only been answering calls at all sorts of times of the day and night and weekends, but they've been able to find locations even with the snowstorm where people were really looking for places to stay because they didn't have power. So it's been a really sort of complicated incident. What we decided to do is the Red Cross initially wanted to have a meeting with the people that they were working with, so we started to put together, through Jennifer, a resource recovery fair for any of the displaced residents. And so on Saturday morning, we had 16 families come, and it was at the community center, and they took advantage of the Board of Selectmen breakfast, which was amazing. Every single one of them was so pleased to have that opportunity.
Good to hear.
To sort of sit down, have a nice warm meal, sort of relax, take in some of the information that they were receiving. we set it up throughout the top of the community center. The YMCA was present, the neighborhood brigade was present. So the Y was surprisingly able to, they have all sorts of connections, and they're able to help with furniture, potentially clothes replacement, and really help with personal property replacement. The neighborhood brigade has been able to help with transportation, getting people to and from appointments, and also they're willing to do meal delivery for folks, because a lot of people are staying in hotels and they only really have access to restaurants, and they're not able to really do any food preparation. So they've been also an amazing community asset that I think we are really lucky in this town to have. Red Cross was there, the emergency fund, which again, I can't say enough great things about. The Department of Transitional Assistance from the state was able to have a representative and help folks that they're already working with to help find them some long-term placement. SMOC was present, as well as the Family Resource Center, which is a partnership between SMOC and Wayside. And also we had Framingham Housing Authority, because they also had some clients that are displaced. So again, they were able to come to one place and really work with some of the needs that we've already sort of identified. Primarily, the biggest one is housing. We also, over that week, received an amazing amount of donations. Kara was working to, with a bunch of volunteers to collect the donations, and they came in the form of gift cards and clothes and baby gear and all sorts of stuff. So we were also able, during that same time, Saturday, we opened the food pantry and sort of set out all the clothes so folks could go through, take what they needed for food, but then also take some of clothes, and they've been coming back all week. As people get more and more settled, they can start actually trying to replace their personal items. So that outreach will continue. There were, as I said, about 16 families who came. I feel like what they were able to gain is a ton of information, but I think they also left with some more hope than they came with, about sort of what their long-term plans will be. Several families have begun to find placements into new apartments. Many of those are out of town, but we're going to try to stay in contact with them to make sure that they're getting the support and the resources that they need as they get back on their feet.
Great.
So,
Very
And
good.
so-
Yes, Joan, did you want to?
how many of the families, how many children were involved, school-age children that were involved?
So of the families that we're working with, there's 2 families that have young children that we know of right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I
they're
was-
probably younger school-aged.
Okay, so there's no school-age kids that were displaced or needed to get transportation back and forth to school that we know of?
I don't believe that's been a need that's been identified, so.
Okay.
Jennifer and Kara have been reaching out to all of the residents and trying to assess needs and trying to sort of do any referrals and also provide any support.
Thank you.
Steve, did you want to?
So I thought I had an opportunity. I know the 3 of us were there. I know Joe and Carl, I think you were at a funeral unfortunately on Saturday. A lot of things going on Saturday. But I thought it was just fantastic. To me, I mean, it was such an expression of community value. And, so if hopefully those folks felt that, I'm glad that we had it overlapped with the breakfast. They were able to enjoy part of that. I did manage to go downstairs. It was phenomenal, the amount of clothing that was put out on tables. But it was just, just a tremendous event, that represents, I think, how we should deal with these things.
Right.
So my question for you is just in terms of, 2 questions, in terms of protocols. I mean, emergency management is your thing. So in the future, protocols for mobilizing, and, we also had with the power outage, I'm not sure who's going to talk about the warming centers, but that's part of this as well. And so that's one question. And then the second question is the Chestnut Street apartment management. Is there a connection there that's been made? Have they been active in this process? Have they communicated?
Yeah, I mean, we have started that process and started that conversation and that dialogue. You know, as, you know, you're kind of alluding to, there have been some concerns, I think, that have been expressed in terms of response, you know, both in terms of timeliness and adequacy of response. So that's something that we're addressing, not just for this particular incident, but also in the future. So,
And the fire department actually met with them today, so we are
Did
sort
they?
of trying to continue that dialogue.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of protocol to mobilize this type of response, I think it was incredibly impressive what we were able to pull together in a very short time frame, given sort of also the snow impacts for resources. So on Saturday, you know, we had the fire department was there, Captain Moorhan was there. We had members of the police department who came in and assisted us with a particular need that we had. Susan Wells was there, Gabe was working, Kara was there with several volunteers that did an amazing job. So I think that we were able to really mobilize that type of resource event pretty well. I certainly think we can learn from that, which, you know, we've talked about having an after action to sort of talk about all of these type of things, because you can always learn. Every incident's gonna be a little different, and so there'll always be those little tweaks. But I think in terms of our time frame and all the people that we're able to bring together was really helpful, because we did reach out to me for just to explore options of having sort of federal assistance for this type of incident, and they were able to give us some state contacts, but they were also activated for several weather events, and a lot of those folks have representatives that go to the EOC. So it was nice to be able to still, even though there's other things going on, bring people together for this particular incident.
So, great job.
yeah.
Congratulations on it.
So,
Good job, good response.
yeah, and just, you know, as Jen mentioned, you know, what complicated the response to the fire situation was the storm. And we knew that it was going to be a significant snow event. I don't think we realized how much of a public health and public safety event it was going to be leading into the next day. So, you know, we had, you know, it happened on Wednesday night, you know, leading into Thursday. I think once we realized how significant the power outages were, it was probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock. So we, you know, we met at the EOC at 3, you know, got on the call with MEMA. And, you know, literally probably in the span of 15 minutes, we had, you know, the chiefs, Chief Davis, Captain Moorhan, Doug Small came in, Jen was on the phone, you know, Ed Berman, Lieutenant Bowden, Jennifer Wolfing came in, Joe Richardson had just gotten home, and so Joe came in again. He had already spent the day and driven back to Leicester. So in 15 minutes, we had everybody assembled and communicating as to how we were going to address this public safety issue, and which was the lack of power. And so in the span of probably 30 minutes, we put together the idea of the warming center and the charging center, you know, started getting that stood up. In the meantime, again, another complicating factor was that the power outage was happening on Main Street, so it affected our public safety buildings. But just as importantly, it affected Park Road and the Ashland Housing Authority and Ashland House. And, you know, for lack of a better, I know they probably won't appreciate this, but some of our vulnerable residents. So we physically actually went to those locations and knocked on the doors. Jennifer Wolfing went to the Housing Authority. Captain Moorhan went to Ashland House, knocked on everybody's door. In the meantime, Ed Berman was getting transportation together and bringing it to those locations so we could put people who wanted to go to the warming center on there, to there. And, you know, Steve, you talk about that whole community feeling and event, and I felt that same kind of spirit, I think, on Thursday night. You know, if you and Rob stopped by, it was, we had probably 20 people, but everybody was just so appreciative that we thought of them and thought of doing this, and we're able to mobilize. Joe ended up coming in. it's just, I was immensely proud of the team that we have. It was really, really inspiring. We ended up doing the same thing on Friday, and of course we had the service, the service on Saturday. But I can tell you, we talked about, when I first started as town manager, collectively we talked about, a human services department, and talking about how we didn't want people to get left out and falling through the cracks. And I really just can't think of a better example of how we've been able to address that need and address those needs than what's happened in the last week. And I give Jennifer a lot of credit, and that's one of the reasons why she's such a perfect match for this position. And I can't say enough about our staff, especially Joe, the chief, and the police department. Ed Berman, Captain Moorhan, the fire department, Jennifer Wolfing, Kara, Diane Mortensen.
Yeah.
It was inspiring. So.
Very, very good. I just wanted to add, there's almost too many people to thank. I was very impressed when I came down there. Especially, what were the names of the Red Cross volunteers? The two women, were they?
Well, there's Chris Ray,
Yeah.
Red Cross.
He was there, and they had actually 2 tables.
There were 2 local people. I'm sorry, they're part of the Medical Reserve Corps.
Oh, Joyce.
Oh, Joyce and, is it Peggy?
Yeah,
I
they're
believe it's
very,
Peggy,
very
yeah.
impressive. There's volunteers for I don't know how
Oh,
long they were
yeah,
there.
I'm going to be
So-
kicking myself tonight because there's going to be so many names that pop up in my
Right.
head that I probably
Yeah.
should have
I'll
acknowledged.
always remember the older couple.
Oh, yeah.
Gabe, yeah.
And the older couple with the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, John and Joan
Yeah.
and Daisy. How
And
could we
Daisy.
forget Daisy?
And I guess, the one thing I would add, I know kind of went through, like, in terms of shelter, when it was time to close the warming center, people had to go back, perhaps their cold apartments. That was a tough one. And so I think later you worked out a scheme of sharing shelters with Framingham. And, it seems to me that was the one piece that we should be looking at in case, we need to stay open all night, or there are cots or places for people to stay.
Yeah.
They can't, they're either elderly or disabled or too vulnerable to go back to an unheated. If this was January, it could have been
It could have been, yeah.
very bad. So.
Yeah, we had several conversations about that and
Yeah.
how we would potentially transport folks to what is our shelter, which is the high school.
Which is the high school,
And how
yeah.
that would sort of impact
Yeah, so that was,
folks there.
But Yolanda, you mentioned regionalization and opportunities for that. This is actually a great
Yeah.
opportunity for regionalization. The problem becomes is everybody's hesitant of taking other towns, residents and people who might be displaced. So that's something that we've got to work on, as a state, actually, is being more accepting of regionalization. Yeah, it's good. All in all, I think Ashland can be proud.
yeah,
So.
very good.
Well done.
In terms of, just one other thing about utility lines and trees, and, I think that's kind of a subject maybe we should put on our radar screen in terms of, like, for example, Chestnut Street, where, one tree came down and took that wire down, closed off the street, lost power to I don't know how many houses. I don't know what happened downtown, but, it's kind of an ongoing issue, tree trimming versus underground utilities. Are we taking the proper steps to, this is really life-threatening stuff when you have a heavy snow that really takes out power and statewide, it was hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, at the high point, it was, 250,000 customers without power statewide. You mentioned,
chunk of
again, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, publicly thank Senator Spilka and Representative Lewis for interceding on our behalf with Eversource in terms of quickening the response. I will tell you, a lot of communities are not, they're not necessarily happy with the response of Eversource and National Grid, not from a lineman perspective, the people actually doing the work, but
Sure.
just from a corporate perspective and how they were prepared to respond to these events, and then also the communication during the response. We found that, we have community liaisons that we work with. They do the best they can, but they can only help us with the information that they get from their their office. And so there's definitely some room for improvement there. I think it's a good idea to actually bring them in terms of a future agenda item. Bring somebody here from Eversource and just have a discussion about that.
But I think it's bigger than that. I think it goes up into a different food chain, which is the Department of Public Utilities and how they manage the utilities as well. And, you know, how do we apply some pressure to the Department of Public Utilities in terms of, you know, whether it's double polls, whether it's responses to events, whether it's the cost of doing business with Eversource?
Well, the structure of public utilities in Massachusetts is a little bit, I don't know if it's unique, but it's different than what I'm used to. It basically eviscerates any kind of sense of competition, really. And so, you know, if you have a poll hearing come before you, you really have no teeth as a board to say, you know what, no, you're not going to get this poll, because who you're actually impacting would be the customer.
Right, the customer who's waiting.
You know, whereas if you had two companies who had the ability to potentially provide that service, you know, and one was a lot more responsive and reactive to what you would like to see in your community, you know, that it might be a different discussion. But that's, you know.
But some, I mean, just to get, in terms of these kind of storms, which we think, you know, we're possibly going to see more and more volatility. I mean, are we
Possibly, yes.
yeah,
think
I
we've
guess I
seen
shouldn't
that
say
over the
possibly,
past
right.
4 or 5
Yeah,
years.
so should, you know, coastal communities are looking at hardening their infrastructure and that kind, and so we're kind of lucky, I don't think we have those kind of that kind of problem, but we have our own kind of issues with, you know, utilities that maybe they should be put underground. What's the plan for that? Is it, you know, is the tree trimming being done properly? What is the responsibility of a private landowner who doesn't cut down an old dead tree that falls on the power lines? You know, that kind of thing. So, you know, I think there's a lot to think about there in terms of what maybe we should be thinking about. I mean, to have a kind of a wet, heavy snow that it otherwise is not a big deal, but everybody loses power.
Yeah,
That's, you know,
I agree.
yeah, so, anyway. But, all right, thanks
Okay.
for that report.
Sure. Briefly, MWRA connection update. Just want to let you know that the bid for the Oregon Road project, you know, came in. We also met with MEPA and DCR, the Massachusetts Water Resources Commission, to talk about the final environmental impact report and filing that. And you know, so I just want to give you an update that that's still being worked on in the background, even though you haven't necessarily seen a lot of activity happening. Downtown Forum. So as Yolanda, you had mentioned earlier tonight, we're going to have our second Downtown Forum on March 29th. What's going to happen at that meeting is that all the information that has been collected by BSC between Co-Urbanize and the first forum and other sources, that is being put together by BSC into several different alternative designs for Main Street and Front Street. And so those are going to be presented at the forum. People will then have an opportunity to provide their feedback as to what they like and what they don't like about those designs. And then this won't be the only opportunity for people to provide feedback on those alternatives. We'll have other methods to do that. And then at that point, BSC will go back and produce a final design that would be our 25% design.
What time is that starting on the 29th?
7 p.m. And doors open at 6:30, and so people will have an opportunity to mill about and look at the
Location?
yep,
Community
at
Community
the
center.
community center. Yep. If you don't mind, I'm just going to do these and then come back. Also, a couple of things that you know, I haven't noted on here, but under town manager reports. Just want to remind everybody, you know, you have received some correspondence that the Board of Health will be giving out their first annual Mary Mortensen Public Health Award on Tuesday. It's an award that's going to be given annually to a recipient who has advanced public health in Ashland and Massachusetts, obviously given in honor of Mary, who really kind of embodied that kind of spirit, and you know, worked behind the scenes a lot, I think, to advance those causes. Didn't get a lot of recognition for it. But, you know, the first recipient is Ed Hart, and, you know, you talk about those things, those qualities that Mary embodied, and I can't really think of anybody else who would embody those more than Ed Hart, somebody who works behind the scenes constantly to, you know, do things that doesn't get a lot of fanfare, whether it's Cadillac paint or herbicide regulations or, you know, tobacco regulations. So he will be receiving that award on Tuesday, given by the Board of Health at 7 p.m. So hopefully people can go.
Right here.
Right here at the BOS room. Mark, for you, thank you for waiting so long. Sheila and I did go to the MPO today at the Boston Transportation Building to talk about the 126 project and advocate for it to still be on the tip for 2020. I don't want to speak too soon. I don't want to jinx it, but it looks like once again we are safe for the 2020 tip.
Were they able to give an explanation about the right-of-way issues and what they're gonna do with the staffing levels, or?
Well, you know, one of the solutions that came, so just to back up, part of the concerns are that, you know, each of these projects, you know, or a majority of them, have right-of-way takings that have to go through a process that take time. So if you know, MassDOT doesn't get the engineering in time, they can't get the right-of-way stuff done in time. And then also what happens is that everybody gets their engineering in at the same month, and so they just don't have enough staff people to turn things around quickly. They gave basically an overview of the timeline. One of the solutions that has been proposed is them using more contractors and consultants, if that happens, and we'll see if that works. Town meeting survey, we mentioned that earlier. I'll be putting that out. That's basically it's going to be a survey for the community to take to talk about their town meeting habits, their town meeting practices, what they would like to see in future town meetings in terms of times, dates, what keeps them from attending and participating. So that goes to that civic engagement that you were talking about. We will be having the senior resource fair. I want to bring that up. I don't know if any of the board members were going to talk about that. That's going to be March 22nd. It's a senior resource roundtable at 1 p.m. at the community center. We're going to have basically an opportunity for seniors to see what kind of services and discounts and things like that are provided to them here in the community. We'll have a number of different departments, a number of different nonprofits available that will be giving presentations and then asking questions.
So that's Thursday, March 22nd at 1 in the afternoon.
March 22nd at 1 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally for me, and then I'll turn it over to Jen. Jen's got one more thing, is Cadillac Paint. They have gone in, they've done the asbestos removal in the buildings. And so we are looking at if the weather cooperates
So, yeah, they're hoping
next
tomorrow
week.
to do the cutting of the water line, and then hopefully next week.
And so next week, we should be rolling the equipment on and taking the buildings down.
Wow.
We have contacted WACA
Okay.
to, you know,
Get some
document
footage of that,
that. and-
document it.
and,
Great.
you know, so it's,
Barring any other
But yeah.
weather,
barring any other,
weather event.
you know, it's killing me, because, you know,
Sorry, what
like I
was
said,
the
you know
date,
how
Michael, you
how
said?
patient I am, so.
What was the date? I'm sorry.
For Cadillac Paint,
Yes.
We don't have a.
we don't have a
Oh, not
We
yet.
can
set date yet.
certainly make sure we
But we're gonna-
share that date once
Yeah,
it's
sure.
done.
Once you get it, email it out to us, that'd be great.
Because you know, you might want to be there. It's going to be,
Could be
Yeah.
interesting, yeah.
Fun thing.
I've been there once so far.
you have?
Oh, yeah, I was on the back road in the construction, people inside, walking back and forth.
Yeah, it's great. It's finally happening. It's
Wow,
finally,
that's good.
finally
Like
happening.
watching the building come down on the corner spot, that was very cool.
Yeah. So, except, you know, the corner spot we talked about for a year. Cadillac Paint we've talked about for
Many
30.
years, yes.
So,
Yeah.
so anyway, Jen, you want to talk about the signs?
So, in the 2016 May town meeting voted to, yeah, you can pass it.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Voted to implement the wayfinding signs throughout downtown. So, about 2 years ago now, we installed the 6 signs that you see, the one which we lovingly call the tombstone sign, out in front of Town Hall, and there's one at the library, Mill Pond, the police and fire. we received some negative feedback once we installed those initially. Primarily, folks did not really like the color scheme, how flat and one-dimensional they were. So we've been trying to work with Bluebird, which is the contractor, to address some of the concerns that were brought up. So based on feedback we received when we put up the initial signs, and then also some feedback that we've received through Co-Urbanize and through the downtown initiative, we've been working with Bluebird to change the design a bit and so be a little bit more reflective of Ashland. So rather than having the downtown seal, go back to our seal. And this is, again, some feedback we received with the banner program where people really liked the deconstructed seal with the bright colors with all, you know, we have the very, the red, the green, and the blue squares. So this is going back to the seal. That's, I think, what people identify with the town. And then also, it's blue, as opposed to that orange and gray, which people didn't really love.
Yeah, Hopkinton green and gray, that mix. So-
Right. And so they'll also have a little bit more dimension. So the seal will be a medallion that will be, come off of the sign a bit, and then the letters will also be, two-dimensional where they're coming out. So what we're hoping is that they're gonna start to do the process to take out the 6 that are already been installed, recreate these new ones, and then put them and reinstall the 6. And then also, one of the issues that we continue to hear is about parking, and what we've learned through the co-urbanized process and other conversations through the downtown initiative is that people don't necessarily know that there's 2 municipal lots right downtown. And so we're going to go forward
Or
with
12
install-
on-street spots, so.
So we're going to go forward with the new blue sort of with the,
Except in a snowstorm.
circle with the P sign, so people know where they can actually park at any given time. And then also, I think in this packet has just the sort of a close-up of what the seal looks like that will be created into the medallion. And then we'll work, one of the other reasons why this project has taken such a long time is that several of the wayfinding signs were actually on private property, and we did not necessarily have the access to install those. And so we've been working to try to figure out, which ones can we actually install? Do they have the right information? So we're still working with Bluebird on that, but we'll start to roll that out and hopefully come to a conclusion with this project. All of the signs will be put in a way that they can be moved, so that through the downtown project, if and when we need to potentially move them because of sidewalks changing dimensions or width, we can do that.
Great.
I got all excited when
Speaking
I
of
saw-
the right information, just so that this doesn't get printed, isn't Homer Street Homer Avenue?
Yes.
Homer Ave, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
And do we have the right town hall date? Okay.
So timeframe, Jen?
So we'll have to wait for some of the snow to melt. But they could do it, this project, they could take this and turn these around in about 2 weeks.
Oh,
So
Okay.
they've had all of the signs cut and sort of ready to go. We've just
Yeah.
been working on some of the design elements.
So was there an additional fee for changing the colors and stuff?
There was additional fee for changing the colors and sort of reworking the seal.
But Chen got him down pretty, I
Yeah.
don't want to.
So, Jen, did you go to the parking at MMA? Did you go to the
I did not, no,
parking session? Well, we'll talk about that sometime.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think I need a motion.
Yes, you do.
So moved.
Go past 10 o'clock.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
aye.
Motion
We knew that
carries.
was coming.
Okay.
I
Jen,
was-
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I was all excited. I thought we were gonna talk about the electronic sign. I was,
Yeah, I kind of lost track of where we are with that. All right, thank you, Jen. Is that, okay, so I think that's the end of the agenda, except for board reports. So, Mr. Mignani, we can start
sure,
with you.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can call you that now.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way. Few things. The kudos to the DPW Fire Department, Police Department, and the management team for having to put up with the nor'easters that we've had back to back. And I heard an expression this evening when I was watching the news tonight, when they were going over the weather forecast for Tuesday and Wednesday. And the weather lady called it a four-easter instead of a northeaster, a four-easter. So that's, that may just last, that may just stick for the duration. I'd like to give kudos and shout out to Coach Roman from the Ashland High School and the boys hockey team. They had a phenomenal season. They had a Cinderella season. They tried to play David and Goliath against Hanover, which was 20-0, and unfortunately this season ended against Hanover. But they had a wonderful season, and kudos to them. And keep your heads held high. They did a great job. And I would just like to thank the town and the townspeople on Saturday. And unfortunately, as Steve said, Kyle and I weren't able to attend the breakfast, which we would have loved. I would rather have been there than where we were. And lost a good friend and my mentor, Steve Zanella, to cancer. And it was a wonderful tribute that the town provided. And thanks to WACA for taping that. And that's something that we'll always have to watch. He was the first one of my group that has since passed away, and it wasn't easy for any of us. And I just want to thank everybody for all the well wishes and the thoughts and prayers, and especially to the Zanella family as well. My heart goes out to them all. Couple other.
Joe, driving by his house on that during the storm day and seeing his plow there.
Oh, you know.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah,
That was a sad.
not an easy thing. It really wasn't an easy thing. And I just wanted to thank everybody for that. And again, kudos to everybody. And I just want to thank some of the neighbors in the area. They actually were walking around and making sure that the people, some of the neighbors that couldn't get out were able to get out and, help out. And it was that camaraderie of a neighborhood thing to see. It reminded me of the blizzard of '78 when people were walking around checking on everybody and walking to make sure that everybody was okay. And that was very nice of them to do that. So that's all I have, and I look forward to being back. I'm sorry I missed the last couple of meetings, but I had a visit. I had to go to Florida and to go to the hospital. So, so we're going to stop doing that. Yeah, I know.
Vacation.
It's not efficient, not at all, not at all.
Thanks, Joe.
But thank you for your thoughts and prayers for everybody that called.
Yolanda?
Thank you.
So I've been at a couple meetings outside of Ashland. On Tuesday, March 6th, I attended the MMA Policy Committee, Municipal and Regional Administration, which I'm a member of, and we actually had the opportunity to go up to the State House and sit with Senate President Chandler. She asked each of us about the issues that our towns and cities were facing, and she was really listening. So she has planned, hopefully we'll be doing that like once a quarter.
Nice.
So that was very good. Then on Thursday evening, I attended the regional selectmen meeting. It did happen. It was interesting just getting the updates from the member selectmen that were there. I have some follow-up that we'll be looking at. We've scheduled the next meeting for June 7th, 2017, and we're gonna do it in Medway again because they hosted so well. What?
18.
June 7th.
Yeah, you
Oh,
said 2017.
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2018. Oh, wow. I too want to just give a shout out and thank you to our Public Works Department for all the work they've done in the past storms. I'm always impressed once you leave our town and you go to the other towns and you just see the difference of the roads and our sidewalks and what they've done. So congratulations and thank you for what you do. I'd also like to thank our fire department and police department for the work that they've done as well during these storms, and certainly with the major fire on Chestnut Street and then the home on Main Street. And thank you to the Ashland Emergency Fund and all the other organizations that have stepped up. I know there's some other private charities that are working to help support these. I know there are people that have been asking how can they help, because the Ashland Emergency Fund is giving funds to help these families that have been displaced. I would say you can donate to them and know that the money will be taken care of and given to people that need it. And also a big shout out to Michael and Jen and the rest of the staff that work to really step up and support our community. I think that's really what makes Ashland Ashland, is all the people who work here and volunteer here and just support each other. And that's all I have.
Well, well said, so I'm not gonna repeat that. That was well said. But, you know, again, I think it's, you know, when we talk about community values, you know, those are the things that really exemplify community values for me, and I think for all of us. So, our BAA grant spring round is completed as of today. Today was the last day for applications to come in. So, which means next week we'll assemble all of the applications, and you and I, Mr. Chair, will review
Okay.
them. We have to set a date to
Looking
meet.
forward to it.
And I would suggest that we put this on the April 4th agenda as well,
Oh, God.
because people are expecting us to respond. So,
All right.
if that works, April 4th for the BAA grants?
Can we,
7 PM?
now we really have to get rid of the auditors. So, I'm just kidding.
So that's, I mean, we can, if
Or we push
we
out to
think
the
we can
second
push it,
meeting in
that's,
April.
that's fine. So you
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
guys figure it out, all right?
Okay,
'Cause what
But
did we
you
say
and
that
I,
we would do it
Rob,
by?
can
yeah, we'll have to do
figure
our
out when
thing.
we can get together, all right?
Right.
So, that's the BAA grant spring rounds, and then, just to, reference back to the town meeting warrant, you know, a lot of the things that we talk about, we don't talk about everything, so we don't talk about the planning board items in any depth, so, just so folks know, the planning board meeting next Thursday, the 22nd, they are having public hearings on all of their potential warrant articles. So you can either watch on WACA, you can attend, it's a full-blown meeting, it's not just a public hearing, so there's lots of stuff on there, so, but it's an opportunity to learn about the zoning articles. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Steve. Carl?
Yeah, well, I would just like to double up on what everyone else has said about the town workers and the strain that it put, the storms and the fires have put on everyone, and it's much appreciated. I want to especially mention Doug and Roy and their crew and all of those guys, and I kind of want to make a shout out to David Foster too, who's not officially on the DPW, but he's kind of an honorary DPW person, does a lot of things around the town during those times that make things work, and doesn't always get credit for it, but job well done by everybody. And just to speak to Steve Zanella a minute, I think that there are times, particularly for some of us old townies, when Ashland still seems like a small town, and there's the small town that we grew up in. Joe knew Steve much better than I did. Steve went to school with my sisters. He spent 42 years on the police force, which is amazing. He, as I said, he went to school with my sisters. He busted me a couple of times. But
Was it for marijuana?
well, no, I'm not going to say. But
Yeah, medical
but
marijuana.
you know, when we seem to spend an inordinate amount of time these days at Mataresis, but going there kind of reminds one of what a small community and what a special community Ashland is. And what I don't realize sometimes is how many Ashland people married other Ashland people, and then had kids who still live in Ashland. And so it's bittersweet, because it's a sad time, and it's also a time when you feel really connected to something which is really special. And so my thoughts are with you, my friend. I know that you lost a good friend, and I will always remember Steve calling me up when I ran for selectman and asking me to put a couple of signs in his yard. And as I said, I didn't know him really well, and I was really touched that he did that. And so we will all miss him. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Carl. I just briefly, it was inspiring to watch the town's response and and the neighbors' response to this, and I just wanted to note that. That was, and the other thing I wanted to, Saturday we had the volunteer breakfast that we do every year, and I thought, one thing we did was we passed, Steve came up with that portable microphone, which turned out to be a great thing. We basically passed that around. I said, people, introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your committees and what you've been doing. And surprise, surprise, they did like to talk, and they talked about, their efforts. And I thought it was, made it a very good experience. And I think we're talking, and that kind of like, we should have these people in, periodically, and that's what I think we're doing. But, maybe we ought to think about doing this event, not so much as a volunteer breakfast, but as almost kind of a committee summit or discussion of what we're all working on, and, what are the things going on, something like that. Kind of like a combination social breakfast thing, workshop, without getting too formal. Because I thought that was a really good process where people got up and talked about what they were doing and what their plans are for the new year. So I did want to mention that, and of course thank the volunteers for all their work over the year. And I'm glad we're able to hold that breakfast for them. The other thing I just wanted to, I think the kids from Parkland and the thing they started, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, I'm really continue to be inspired and heartened by what is really nationwide high school and college kids really standing up and saying they want to do something about gun violence in the schools and really in society and change things. And I just hope that's going to go somewhere, that continues to be. And I think you saw the chief actually mention it today in his presentation on community safety. And I understand that the kids at Ashland High marched yesterday at the event and have been doing things. So that's great to hear. So I wanted to mention that. So I will.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you all. Good night.